Beneath the vast, wind-swept steppes of Eurasia lies a secret so strange, it defies everything we think we know about death. The ancient Scythians, a nomadic warrior culture feared by empires from Greece to Persia, didn't just bury their dead, they sent them into the afterlife with rituals so bizarre, they blur the line between history and nightmare. Picture this: golden masks fused to the faces of corpses, tombs choked with hallucinogenic smoke, and horses sacrificed by the dozens to serve their masters in the underworld. These weren't simple graves, they were portals to another world, packed with treasures, drugs, and even the bones of servants killed to accompany their rulers. Over the next few minutes, we'll pull back the curtain on 30 of their most shocking burial practices, from embalmed warriors tattooed with mythical beasts to rumors of cannibalism during funeral feasts. By the time we're done, you'll see why archaeologists still whisper about the Scythians' cursed gold and why their Kurgans, those haunting burial mounds, are called the Siberian pyramids. Stick around, because what we're about to uncover isn't just history, it's a descent into a realm where death was only the beginning. Now, let's step into the world of the Scythian elite, where death wasn't the end, it was a golden transformation. Picture a warrior laid to rest, his face forever preserved under a shimmering mask of gold, crafted with such precision it seems almost alive. This was no ordinary burial tradition. The Scythians believed these golden death masks were far more than just decoration. They were sacred armor for the soul's journey into the afterlife. Take the famous discovery of the Scythian prince in the Arjun burial mound, deep in Siberia's frozen earth. When archaeologists uncovered his tomb, they found a man draped in gold, his face hidden behind a mask so intricately detailed it captured every ridge and contour. But here's the eerie part: the features weren't just lifelike, they were exaggerated with piercing eyes and a stern expression, as if the mask was designed to intimidate even the spirits of the underworld. Some masks even bore symbols of power, like swirling patterns or animal motifs, hinting at the wearer's rank or deeds in life. Gold wasn't chosen just for its beauty. To the Scythians, it was a metal of the gods, untarnishable, eternal, and radiant like the sun. By sealing their dead beneath these masks, they weren't just honoring them. They were ensuring their elites wouldn't arrive in the afterlife as mere shadows, but as luminous, unbreakable beings. Imagine the message this sent to the living and the dead alike. Here was a warrior so mighty, even death couldn't strip him of his glory. But these masks weren't just about status. They acted as passports, granting safe passage through the treacherous realms beyond. Unlike the Egyptians, who mummified their dead to preserve the physical body, the Scythians focused on the face, the seat of identity. A golden mask was a way to say, "This is who I am, remember me," and it worked. Thousands of years later, we're still piecing together their stories, one shimmering fragment at a time. What's even more fascinating is how these masks reveal the Scythians' deep connections across the ancient world. Some bear stylistic hints of Greek or Persian influence, proof that even in death, these nomads carried traces of the empires they'd traded with, raided, or ruled. The golden faces of the Scythians weren't just relics, they were mirrors, reflecting a culture that thrived at the crossroads of civilizations. And with that, we've only scratched the surface. But hold that thought, because next, we're venturing into the haze of Scythian funeral rites where purification didn't mean water, but clouds of mind-altering smoke. Now, let's lift the veil on one of the most mind-bending Scythian rituals, a funeral practice that didn't just honor the dead but altered the minds of the living. Picture this: a dense, fragrant smoke curling through a felt tent, warriors seated inside, breathing deep as the air thickens with the scent of burning hemp. This wasn't mere recreation. According to the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, the Scythians saw cannabis as a sacred bridge between worlds, a tool to purify both body and soul before the final farewell. Herodotus recounts how mourners would enter small, enclosed tents, tossing hemp seeds onto searing hot stones. The result, a vaporous cloud so potent it induced trance-like states. He wrote that the Scythians howled with joy as the smoke enveloped them, their ecstatic cries echoing across the steppe. At first, modern scholars dismissed this as exaggeration until archaeology proved otherwise. In the frozen tombs of Permafrost, scientists discovered bronze censers, still caked with charred cannabis residue. Even more telling, the remnants contained high levels of psychoactive compounds, confirming these weren't just casual rituals. They were deliberate, calculated acts of spiritual communion. But why cannabis for a culture that revered the horse? The answer might lie in its wild, untamed energy. Just as horses carried the Scythians across earthly plains, cannabis may have been their steed for traversing the spirit world. Some researchers suggest these rites served a dual purpose, cleansing participants of grief while opening a channel to the departed. Imagine the scene: warriors, their senses heightened, visions swirling as they sought guidance or messages from the other side. It's a stark contrast to the quiet solemnity of modern funerals. The Permafrost findings reveal even darker layers. In one tomb, a woman's body was surrounded by pouches of cannabis, her burial cloak embroidered with motifs of twisting vines. Was she a shaman tasked with guiding souls, or perhaps a noblewoman whose passage required extra spiritual fortification? The Scythians left no manuals, but the evidence speaks volumes. These weren't random acts, they were meticulously planned ceremonies woven into the very fabric of their beliefs about death. What's striking is how this practice mirrors global traditions, from Siberian shamans to Vedic priests, hinting at a shared ancient understanding of plants as portals. Yet the Scythians made it uniquely their own. Unlike cultures that consumed cannabis in drinks or foods, they vaporized it, maximizing its intensity. This wasn't about pleasure, it was about transformation, a collective ritual where the living and the dead met in the haze between worlds. And while the golden masks ensured elites were recognized in the afterlife, cannabis may have been the great equalizer, a substance that dissolved barriers, if only temporarily, between mourner and spirit, human and divine. As the smoke cleared, the message was clear. Death wasn't an end, but a journey, and the Scythians intended to send their loved ones off with every advantage, even if it meant altering reality itself. But the surprises don't stop here. Up next, we'll uncover how the Scythians turned graves into battle-ready processions, complete with sacrificed horses and chariots poised for an otherworldly charge. Now, let's turn our attention to the thundering heartbeat of Scythian culture, their horses. For these nomadic warriors, a horse wasn't just a companion. It was a sacred extension of their very identity, so vital that they often took them into the afterlife. Imagine a burial mound not with just one or two horses, but sometimes dozens, their bodies arranged in precise formations, as if ready to charge into eternity. This wasn't mere symbolism. For the Scythians, the bond between warrior and steed transcended death itself. Archaeology gives us breathtaking glimpses of this belief. In the frozen Permafrost tombs of Siberia, explorers uncovered chariots with intact wheels, their wooden frames preserved for over 2,000 years by permafrost. But even more striking were the horses, some buried in full ceremonial harnesses, their manes braided with colorful felt, their tack adorned with gold and intricate animal motifs. These weren't just random sacrifices. The horses were positioned as if mid-gallop, their legs folded beneath them in a dynamic pose, forever frozen in motion. Why such an elaborate send-off? The answer lies in the Scythian worldview. Horses weren't just tools of war or transport, they were spiritual allies. In a culture where speed and mobility meant survival, the horse became a symbol of freedom, power, and even divine favor. Ancient texts describe Scythians drinking mare's milk, using horse blood in rituals, and believing that their finest steeds could carry them to the realm of the gods. To bury a warrior without his horse would be like sending a king into battle unarmed, unthinkable. Some of the most revealing finds come from the Kurgan in modern-day Ukraine, where excavators uncovered a chieftain buried with 13 horses, each wearing elaborate headdresses. But the detail that stunned researchers: the animals were arranged in a circle around the tomb's entrance, their heads turned outward as if standing guard. This wasn't just a funeral, it was a military formation, a final defense against whatever awaited in the afterlife. The chariots add another layer of mystery. Unlike the light, fast vehicles used in battle, some burial chariots were massive, with 4 or even 6 wheels, clearly built for ceremonial purposes. One theory suggests these represented sun chariots, meant to carry the deceased skyward like the mythical steeds of solar deities. Others argue they were status symbols, displaying the wealth and influence of the departed. Either way, the message was clear: in death, as in life, the Scythian elite would travel in style. But perhaps the most poignant discovery came from a lesser-known Kurgan in Kazakhstan, where a young warrior was found buried with his favorite horse, its skeleton showing evidence of a healed leg fracture. This wasn't a random sacrifice. This horse had been cared for, likely saved by its owner, only to follow him into the grave years later. The intimacy of this act speaks volumes. For the Scythians, loyalty didn't end at death. Modern reconstructions of these burials reveal astonishing craftsmanship. Horses were often dressed in felt masks with antlers, transforming them into mythical creatures. Some even had leather wings attached, suggesting they were meant to fly the deceased to paradise. The parallels with later cultures, from Viking ship burials to Chinese terracotta cavalry, hint at a universal human urge to equip the dead for their journey. But the Scythians took it further, blurring the line between mortal and myth. As we piece together these discoveries, one truth emerges: the Scythians didn't just bury their dead. They staged grand departures, complete with every asset needed for the next world. And for a warrior culture that lived and died by the saddle, that meant taking their horses with them, not as mere possessions but as eternal companions. But the mysteries only deepen from here. Next, we'll confront one of the darkest aspects of Scythian funerals: the chilling evidence of human sacrifices, where servants and warriors were bound to their masters even in death. Now, let's step into one of the most unsettling aspects of Scythian burial customs: human sacrifices. While the idea of taking loyal servants or companions into the afterlife might sound like something out of myth, archaeology confirms this practice was chillingly real. For the Scythians, death wasn't just a solitary journey. It was a procession, and for the elite, that meant they wouldn't go alone. Take the Kurgan, one of the most revealing sites ever uncovered. Here, a Scythian queen was laid to rest with an entire retinue of warriors, attendants, and possibly even wives. The skeletons were arranged around her burial chamber, some still wearing jewelry or clutching weapons. But what sends a shiver down the spine is the way these individuals were positioned. Their bodies show no signs of struggle, their limbs carefully placed as if they had lain down willingly. This has sparked a heated debate among scholars. Were these sacrifices voluntary acts of loyalty, or were they forced into the grave? Some argue the Scythians practiced a form of ritual suicide, where trusted followers chose to join their leader in death. Ancient Greek historians like Herodotus described similar customs among neighboring tribes, where loyal servants would compete for the honor of accompanying their masters. In this view, the grave was less a tomb and more a final gathering of a chief's inner circle, bound together for eternity. But there's a darker interpretation. Forensic studies of certain burials reveal telltale signs of violence: skulls with blunt force trauma, spines severed by sharp blows. At the Alexandropol Kurgan, for example, excavators found a young warrior buried with his weapons, but his skeleton showed his hands had been tied behind his back. This suggests that not all who entered the grave did so by choice. Some may have been prisoners of war offered as symbolic escorts, while others could have been lower status individuals compelled into service even in death. The most haunting evidence comes from the way these sacrifices were carried out. Unlike the horses, which were often killed swiftly with a single blow to the head, human remains sometimes show signs of prolonged suffering. In one burial mound in the Altai region, a woman was found with an elaborate headdress, but her neck vertebrae were crushed, indicating strangulation. Nearby, a young man's ribs were pierced by an arrow, suggesting he was shot at close range. These aren't the marks of peaceful passage. They're the traces of ritualized violence, a stark reminder that the Scythian afterlife demanded a price. Yet even here, there are nuances. Some graves contain individuals buried with clear markers of respect: fine clothing, weapons, or gifts. These might represent high-ranking retainers who chose to follow their leaders, their deaths commemorated with honor. In contrast, others were buried with no possessions at all, their bodies tossed unceremoniously into pits. This duality hints at a complex social hierarchy, where status determined not just how you lived, but how and with whom you died. Then there's the question of gender. While male warriors dominate the sacrificial record, women weren't exempt. The aforementioned Altai burial included multiple female attendants, their bodies adorned with intricate tattoos and amber beads. Were these wives, priestesses, or slaves? The answer remains elusive, but their presence underscores how deeply ingrained this practice was across Scythian society. Modern reconstructions of these scenes paint a vivid picture. Imagine a funeral procession where the deceased is carried to the Kurgan, followed by their retinue. Drums might have beaten as the chosen ones drank a final ritual brew, possibly laced with poison or hallucinogens. Then, as the tomb was sealed, those inside would take their places, some lying down peacefully, others meeting a more brutal end. It's a far cry from the golden masks and horse sacrifices we've seen earlier. This was the Scythian underworld at its most visceral, but why go to such extremes? Some scholars believe these sacrifices were meant to mirror the social order of the living world. A king needed his court, a warrior his comrades, a queen her handmaidens. In a culture where identity was tied to one's tribe and rank, the afterlife may have been seen as a continuation of earthly hierarchies. Others suggest it was a display of power, a way for rulers to flex their authority even in death, proving they could command loyalty beyond the grave. Yet perhaps the most unsettling theory is that these acts were simply pragmatic. The Scythians, always on the move, had no use for prisoners or excess mouths to feed. A leader's death might have been seen as an opportunity to trim the community, eliminating rivals or dependents in one ritual stroke. It's a grim thought, but one that aligns with the harsh realities of nomadic life. As we peel back these layers, one thing becomes clear: Scythian funerals weren't just about honoring the dead. They were about controlling the narrative of death itself, who got to accompany the elite, how they'd serve in the next life, and what message this sent to the living. And just when you think the mysteries can't get any stranger, wait until we explore the next practice: the Scythians' eerie obsession with preserving their dead, using techniques that rivaled even the Egyptians. Moving from the grim spectacle of human sacrifice, we now uncover a practice that showcases the Scythians' surprising sophistication, their mastery of embalming. While the Egyptians are often hailed as the ultimate preservers of the dead, the Scythians developed their own intricate methods, rivaling even the famed mummification techniques of the Nile. What's more, thanks to Siberia's icy grip, some of these preserved bodies have survived nearly intact, offering us a window into a world frozen in time. Take the legendary Ice Maiden, discovered in the Altai Mountains. When archaeologists brushed away the permafrost, they found her body so perfectly preserved that her tattoos were still vivid mythical creatures curling around her arms and shoulders. Her organs had been carefully removed, her cavity stuffed with fragrant herbs and horsehair, a practice eerily similar to Egyptian mummification. But here's the twist: while the Egyptians used natron salt to dry their dead, the Scythians relied on natural cold and plant-based preservatives. The result, a mummy so lifelike that her facial features and even her clothing survived, down to the intricate felt boots she wore. The process began with evisceration. Scythian embalmers would make small incisions to remove the brain through the nose, just as Egyptian priests did, and extract internal organs to slow decay. But instead of canopic jars, they packed the body with wild celery, wormwood, and other aromatic plants, not just for preservation but to mask the scent of death. Some scholars believe these plants held spiritual significance, perhaps purifying the corpse for its journey. The body was then sewn up and wrapped in layers of felt or leather, creating a snug cocoon. In elite burials, this bundle was placed inside a hollowed-out log, effectively a nomadic sarcophagus. Permafrost did the rest. In Kurgans like those in Pazyryk, the combination of underground ice lenses and airtight burial chambers created accidental freezer tombs. These conditions preserved organic materials that would have vanished elsewhere. The Ice Maiden's elaborate headdress, woven from wood, gold, and felt, her skirt made of camel wool, even the remnants of her last meal, cheese and horse milk, found in wooden vessels beside her. It's as if the Scythians engineered time capsules, their dead kept pristine by Siberia's unforgiving climate. The tattoos tell another story. Unlike the Egyptians who concealed their mummies in wrappings, the Scythians decorated their skin as a canvas. The Ice Maiden's body art, griffins, deer, and fantastical beasts wasn't just adornment. These images matched gold figurines found in graves, suggesting tattoos served as spiritual armor or markers of status. Another chieftain, known as the Pazyryk horseman, bore tattoos of a fish scaling his leg, possibly a clan symbol, and a snarling predator on his back, its tail curling over his shoulder. These weren't hidden in death but displayed proudly, as if the wearers expected to carry them into battle beyond the grave. Comparing Scythian and Egyptian methods reveals fascinating contrast. While both cultures prioritized preservation, their motivations differed. Egyptians mummified to ensure the soul's reunion with its body in the afterlife. The Scythians, however, seem to have embalmed for more immediate reasons, to maintain the deceased's appearance during prolonged funeral rites, which could last weeks as tribes gathered. There's also evidence they reused burial chambers, periodically reopening them to add new members of a family or retinue. In these cases, embalming kept earlier occupants presentable for later guests. The clothing preserved in these tombs is a revelation. The Scythians didn't dress their dead in shrouds but in their finest attire. The Ice Maiden wore a long, striped woolen skirt and a belted tunic, her outfit accessorized with delicate gold pins. Another male mummy, the Yukok warrior, was buried in a fur-trimmed coat and leggings, his ensemble practical for the steppes yet ornate with appliqued designs. These finds shatter old stereotypes of nomads as crude or unrefined. Their textiles, woven with dyed threads in complex patterns, rivaled those of settled civilizations. Perhaps the most poignant detail is how these mummies humanized the Scythians. The Ice Maiden's face, reconstructed from her skull, shows high cheekbones and almond-shaped eyes. Her hands, nails still intact, rest peacefully on her abdomen. She isn't an artifact but a person, her individuality preserved across millennia. This intimacy makes their practices all the more striking. These weren't abstract rituals but deeply personal acts designed to keep loved ones alive in some form. As we thaw the secrets of these frozen tombs, one question lingers. How did nomadic herders, constantly on the move, develop such advanced techniques? The answer may lie in their interactions with other cultures. Trade routes connected them to Egypt, Persia, and China, allowing knowledge exchange, but the Scythians didn't simply copy. They adapted, merging foreign ideas with their own innovations to create something uniquely theirs. And just when you think their burial rites couldn't get more elaborate, wait until we explore the next chapter. The colossal Kurgans, engineered not just as tombs but as underground palaces for the dead. Now we step into the shadow of the Scythians' most visible legacy, the towering Kurgans that still dot the Eurasian steppe like ancient skyscrapers. These weren't just graves but declarations of power carved into the landscape itself. Imagine a mound 20 meters high that's as tall as a 6-story building built entirely by hand, with wooden chambers beneath so elaborate they mirrored the homes of the living. The scale alone tells us these projects weren't the work of a few mourners but entire communities laboring for months, perhaps even years. Take the colossal Chertomlik Kurgan in modern-day Ukraine, its original height estimated at 21 meters. Beneath its earthen shell lay a labyrinth of oak-lined corridors and chambers, their walls hung with felt tapestries and gold plaques. The central room was a dead chieftain's domain, furnished with bronze cauldrons and his favorite weapons, while side chambers housed sacrificed horses, their harnesses studded with turquoise and coral. This wasn't just burial, it was architectural theater designed to awe the living as much as honor the dead. Construction began with a funeral feast. Herodotus describes how Scythians would gash their faces and drink wine mixed with the blood of sacrificed animals, a ritual that may have bonded participants to the monumental task ahead. Then came the earth-moving. Using antler picks and leather baskets, workers dug deep pits, lining them with logs to create subterranean houses. Some chambers had peaked roofs resembling yurts, the nomad's traditional dwelling, while others mimicked the rectangular halls of settled cultures the Scythians encountered. The body was placed inside alongside grave goods, and the chamber sealed with layers of stone, clay, and finally earth, piled ever higher until the Kurgan dominated the horizon. The engineering challenges were staggering. Without wheels or pulleys, laborers hauled thousands of tons of soil, often in freezing temperatures. At sites like Arjan in Tuva, archaeologists found that builders used a lattice of larch logs to stabilize the mound's core, preventing collapse. Some Kurgans even incorporated drainage system stone channels to divert rainwater, proving these were long-term investments, not hasty tombs, and they worked. Many Kurgans stood undisturbed for 2,500 years until modern excavations. But why go to such extremes? First, territory. On the open steppe where stone was scarce, a Kurgan served as an unmistakable landmark, declaring, "This land is ours." The higher the mound, the greater the chief's prestige, with some rivaling small hills. Second, spirituality. The Scythians may have believed the dead needed homes mirroring their earthly ones, complete with furnishings. At the Pazyryk Kurgans, excavators found carpets on chamber floors and wooden tables set with dishes, as if expecting ghostly banquets. The labor itself held meaning. Building a Kurgan wasn't just physical work, it was a communal rite binding tribes together through shared effort. Some mounds contain layers of alternating soil colors, suggesting different clans contributed distinct materials. The act of piling earth may have symbolized recreating the world mountain at the center of Scythian cosmology, a literal axis between earth and sky. Even the location spoke volumes. Kurgans often crowned strategic heights, river junctions, trade routes, or migration paths, ensuring constant visibility. The Great Blisnitsa Kurgan near the Black Sea commanded views for miles, its position asserting control over both land and sea. Others formed necropolises with smaller mounds clustered around a central, royal Kurgan-like subjects around a throne. The aftermath of construction reveals darker truths. At several sites, archaeologists uncovered the bodies of laborers buried in the Kurgan's outer layers, some crushed beneath collapsed walls. Were these accidents or sacrifices to sanctify the site? The line between honor and coercion blurs, a reminder that these wonders came at a human cost. Yet the Kurgan's endurance is their own rebuttal. While Scythian tents and wagons rotted away, these earthen pyramids outlasted empires. They became waypoints for later nomads who sometimes added their own dead to the mounds. Even today, locals avoid disturbing them, whispering that the spirits within still ride the steppe winds. As we descend from these man-made mountains, another marvel awaits the Scythians' obsession with animal art, where every creature from stags to griffins pulsed with hidden meaning. Moving from the colossal Kurgans to the treasures within, we uncover one of the Scythians' most mesmerizing burial traditions, the dazzling animal art that adorned their tombs. These weren't mere decorations but a visual language where every stag, griffin, and predator pulsed with spiritual significance. Imagine opening a Scythian chieftain's grave to find a golden panther coiled into a ring, its muscles taut as if ready to spring, or a stag pendant with antlers that twist like branches into celestial patterns. These artifacts reveal a culture deeply entwined with the natural world, where animals were far more than food or foes. They were messengers, guardians, and echoes of the divine. Take the famous golden stag from the Kostromskaya Kurgan, its body arched in mid-leap, antlers flowing into intricate spirals. This masterpiece, crafted in the 7th century before the Common Era, isn't just a tribute to the steppes' wildlife. The exaggerated antlers, some scholars argue, mirror the tree of life in Siberian shamanism, a bridge between earth and the spirit realm. For a nomadic people who lived by the rhythms of migration and the hunt, animals symbolized survival but also transcendence. A stag might represent swiftness in battle, while a griffin, part eagle, part lion, embodied the Scythians' own duality, fierce conquerors with a touch of the supernatural. The Pazyryk tombs in Siberia offer even more clues. Here, excavators found felt hangings embroidered with battling griffins and carpets showing riders morphing into eagles. One striking piece depicts a stag with its head twisted backward, a pose seen in Siberian shamanic art to signify spiritual transformation. These motifs weren't random. Scythian artisans, often working in gold, wood, or felt, stylized animals into what's called the animal style, where bodies contort into flowing, almost geometric shapes. The effect, a sense of motion, as if these creatures were caught mid-ritual, frozen between worlds. But why bury such art with the dead? The answer lies in the Scythians' shamanic worldview. Many indigenous Eurasian belief systems held that animals guided souls to the afterlife. A golden fish might help navigate underworld rivers, while a winged horse could carry the deceased skyward. Some figurines, like the ibex plaques found in Ukraine, show animals with exaggerated eyes, possibly to watch over the dead or ward off evil spirits. Others, like the gold panthers from Kelams, have hollow bodies that once held herbs or ashes, blending art with ritual function. The materials themselves spoke volumes. Gold, never tarnishing, mirrored the eternal nature of the soul. The Scythians, who controlled trade routes from Greece to China, flaunted their wealth by gifting elites with animal-adorned weapons and jewelry. A chief buried with a golden fish-shaped dagger wasn't just armed for the grave. He carried a symbol of divine authority. Even everyday items like belt buckles shaped as wolves reinforced identity. To wear a wolf was to channel its cunning. To bury it was to take that power into the next life. The animal art also reflected social hierarchy. Common graves might hold simple bronze deer figurines, while royals boasted elaborate diadems with entire herds of golden stags. At Arjun too, a prince's cloak was studded with thousands of tiny gold panthers, each a testament to his status as both warrior and spiritual leader. The message was clear: just as animals ruled their domains, so did Scythian elites rule theirs. Yet beneath the opulence lay deeper fears. Some creatures, like the griffin, were mythical hybrids that defied nature. Scholars suggest these beings warded off grave robbers or malevolent spirits. A griffin's lion half symbolized earthly power, while its eagle half promised ascendance. Even the placement of animal art held meaning. Figurines often clustered near the corpse's head or chest, as if guarding vital essence. In one grave, a silver cup bore engravings of wolves chasing deer, perhaps a metaphor for the soul's journey through perilous realms. The Scythians' animal obsession wasn't unique. Neighbors like the Sarmatians and Xiongnu shared similar motifs, but what set the Scythians apart was their fusion of realism and surrealism. Compare their stags to, say, Greek depictions. Where Greek artists prized anatomical accuracy, Scythians exaggerated features to evoke magic. A stag's antlers might spiral into solar symbols, or its legs bend unnaturally, suggesting motion across spiritual planes. Modern archaeology keeps revealing surprises. In 2019, a Kurgan in southern Russia yielded a gold plaque of two back-to-back felines, their tails morphing into vines. This vegetal-animal style hints at influences from as far as India, proving the Scythians were cultural sponges. Even their tattoos followed animal style. The Ice Maidens' preserved skin bore a stag identical to gold figurines, blurring the line between body art and burial art. As we unravel these symbolic menageries, a pattern emerges. For the Scythians, death wasn't an end but a migration guided by spirit animals. Their art ensured the journey wasn't made alone. And just when we think we've decoded their symbols, another mystery surfaces, like the decapitated corpses buried with false heads, a practice as haunting as it is enigmatic. Now we turn from the dazzling gold of animal art to a far darker and more puzzling burial practice, one that leaves modern archaeologists both baffled and unsettled. Among the Scythian graves, there are those that hold headless bodies, their skulls mysteriously replaced with eerie substitutes. These false heads, crafted from clay, felt, or even leather, raise chilling questions. Was this a form of punishment, a spiritual safeguard, or something else entirely? Take the discovery at the Glino burial site in Ukraine, where a warrior's skeleton lay without its skull, replaced by a mold of dark clay molded into crude facial features. Nearby, another grave held a felt head stuffed with grass, its stitched mouth and hollow eyes staring blankly upward. At first glance, one might assume these were victims of wartime beheadings, their heads taken as trophies. But the careful placement of the false heads suggests something more deliberate, more ritualistic. Some scholars argue that this practice was reserved for those who died far from home, their real heads lost or unrecoverable. The false head then acted as a stand-in, ensuring the deceased could enter the afterlife whole, their spirit intact. Other theories take a grimmer turn. Herodotus, the Greek historian, claimed that Scythian kings executed enemies by decapitation, keeping their skulls as drinking cups. Could these headless burials belong to the disgraced or the condemned? Yet the evidence complicates this idea. Many of these graves belong to individuals buried with honor, surrounded by weapons, jewelry, even sacrificed horses. If these were criminals, why give them such rich send-offs? A third possibility emerges from Scythian beliefs about the soul. Across many ancient cultures, the head was seen as the seat of consciousness, the vessel of identity. Removing it might have been a way to confuse malevolent spirits, preventing them from recognizing or haunting the dead. The false head then becomes a decoy, a trick to mislead whatever lurked in the afterlife. Some false heads even had mouths sewn shut, as if to silence the dead or stop them from speaking curses. The Siberian Pazyryk culture, closely linked to the Scythians, offers another clue. In one burial, a woman's corpse was found with a detached head placed at her feet, wrapped in a cloth. Her real skull had been removed post-mortem, possibly for separate burial rites. This suggests that the Scythians may have practiced a form of secondary burial, where the body was treated in stages. The head, the most sacred part, might have been preserved separately, perhaps to be reunited with the body in the afterlife. But the most perplexing cases are those where the false heads seem personalized. In a Kurgan near the Black Sea, archaeologists uncovered a headless man buried with a leather face covering, its features delicately painted to resemble a human likeness. Around his neck lay a golden torque, signifying high status. Was this an attempt to recreate his visage, to give him an identity in death when his real head was gone? Or was it a mask meant to transform him into something or someone else entirely? The mystery deepens when we consider the materials used. Felt, a fabric associated with yurts and nomadic life, might have symbolized a home for the soul. Clay, molded from the earth, could represent rebirth. One burial in Kazakhstan even held a false head made from a horse's skull, wrapped in leather, a merging of human and animal, perhaps to grant the dead the strength of a steed in the next world. Modern technology adds new layers to the puzzle. CT scans of some clay heads reveal hidden compartments, some holding herbs or tiny bones. Were these meant as offerings, or did they serve a magical function? The Scythians left no written record, so we're left piecing together their intentions from fragments. What's clear is that this practice wasn't rare. From the Danube to Mongolia, headless burials with prosthetics appear across Scythian territories, spanning centuries. Some graves even show signs of the heads being removed long after death, the bones neatly cut, not hacked. This points to a widespread, deeply rooted tradition, one that may have varied by tribe or circumstance. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't why the heads were removed, but why they were replaced. For a culture that buried their dead with everything they might need, gold, horses, even cannabis, a missing head wasn't just a physical absence, it was a spiritual emergency. The false heads, crude or crafted, were acts of care, ensuring no soul was left incomplete on its final journey. As we ponder these silent sentinels of the grave, one thing becomes clear. The Scythians saw death as a frontier, a place where the rules of this world blurred. And just as we begin to grasp their logic, we're faced with yet another enigma. Like the bronze mirrors they shattered and buried, portals to a realm we can scarcely imagine. Shifting from the unsettling mystery of headless burials, we now uncover another captivating ritual, one that reflects the Scythians' deep connection to the unseen. Bronze mirrors, often found shattered or carefully positioned beside the dead, were far more than vanity objects. These polished discs, some as large as dinner plates, may have served as mystical gateways, divination tools, or even shields against the supernatural. Take the discovery in a woman's grave near the Don River, where a mirror lay near her waist, its surface intentionally cracked into 4 pieces. Nearby, another burial held a mirror wrapped in felt, as if to preserve its power. At first glance, this seems contradictory. Why break a valuable item only to treat it with reverence? The answer lies in the Scythians' belief that mirrors held dual roles, as guides for the living and passports for the dead. Chinese chronicles from the Han Dynasty describe Scythian shamans who used mirrors to catch the breath of the heavens, interpreting flashes of light as messages from spirits. Some mirrors even bore symbols like the tree of life or celestial animals, suggesting they mapped cosmic realms. The act of breaking mirrors might have been a deliberate ritual. In many ancient cultures, shattering an object released its spiritual essence. A fractured mirror could symbolize the fragmentation of the soul's journey or create multiple doorways to the afterlife. Archaeologists note that some mirrors were broken after being placed in the grave, perhaps to activate their magic during burial rites. Others show where patterns indicating frequent use, rubbed smooth in the center from years of divination. One of the most striking finds comes from the Altai Mountains, where a chieftain's tomb held a mirror etched with a stag standing atop a spiral. This motif, echoed in Scythian tattoos and goldwork, likely represented the soul's ascent to the sky. The spiral might depict the cyclical path of the dead, mirroring the sun's daily rebirth. Significantly, this mirror was placed facing upward, as if to reflect not the mortal world but the heavens above. The Chinese accounts add another layer. Historian Sima Qian wrote of Scythian seers who read the clouds in bronze, interpreting weather patterns and fate. This aligns with discoveries of mirrors buried near the deceased's head, possibly to help them see their future in the afterlife. Some mirrors even had handles shaped like axes, a fusion of weapon and oracle, implying their use in both battle rituals and prophecy. But mirrors also had a protective role. In a Kurgan near Moldova, a child's grave contained a tiny mirror laid over the chest, perhaps to deflect evil spirits. Folklore from the Caucasus describes mirrors as soul catchers, capable of trapping malicious entities. The Scythians may have believed a mirror could absorb harmful energy, shielding the dead as they crossed into the next world. This could explain why some mirrors were buried face down, effectively sealing away danger. The materials themselves held meaning. Unlike the crude bronze of everyday tools, funerary mirrors were often alloyed with silver, giving them an otherworldly sheen. A few rare examples, like one from the Kurgan in Kazakhstan, were gilded with gold, reserved for elites who needed the brightest portal to the divine. The backs of these mirrors were often intricately decorated with geometric patterns or animal combat scenes, turning them into portable altars. Perhaps the most poignant example comes from a warrior's grave in Tuva, where a mirror was found nestled beside a coiled hemp rope. This pairing hints at a ritual: the rope to bind spirits, the mirror to reveal them. Modern experiments show that smoke from burning cannabis, a known Scythian practice, can create swirling patterns on polished bronze, potentially used to induce visions. The ubiquity of these mirrors across Scythian lands, from the Black Sea to Xinjiang, suggests a shared spiritual language. Whether as diviners' tools, cosmic maps, or spirit shields, they reflect a culture that saw death not as an end, but as a journey requiring both guidance and protection. And just as these mirrors once captured fleeting glimpses of another world, they now offer us fragmented reflections of a belief system both sophisticated and enigmatic. As we piece together these shimmering clues, another discovery awaits, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about gender and power in the ancient steppes. High in the Russian foothills, graves of battle-scarred women armed with bows and axes would inspire myths that endured for millennia, the legendary Amazons. Now, let's turn our attention to a discovery that shattered long-held assumptions about gender roles in the ancient world: the graves of Scythian women buried not with domestic tools, but with weapons and armor, their bodies bearing the unmistakable marks of battle. These warrior women, whose existence blurred the lines between myth and history, became the real-life inspiration for the legendary Amazons of Greek tales. Take the groundbreaking 2019 excavation in Russia's Voronezh region, where archaeologists uncovered 4 women buried with a stunning array of weapons. One, aged around 45, lay with a bent iron dagger, arrowhead still lodged in her ribs, evidence of violent combat. Another, barely 20, was found with a quiver of 40 arrows, her bowed legs suggesting a lifetime on horseback. The most striking was a woman in her 30s, buried with a ceremonial headdress and a bronze-tipped spear, her skull showing a deep, healed gash from an axe blow. These weren't symbolic gestures. These women had fought, bled, and likely commanded respect in a society often depicted as male-dominated. The Greeks, who encountered Scythian tribes near the Black Sea, spun fantastical tales of Amazons' matriarchal warriors who cut off their right breasts to better draw bows. Yet the reality, as these graves reveal, was both more nuanced and more fascinating. Scythian women didn't need to mutilate themselves for battle prowess. Their burials show they were simply warriors, full stop. In the Don River Basin, one young woman was buried with an iron sword so heavy it would have required 2 hands to wield, alongside a horse sacrificed in her honor. Near the Caucasus, another grave held a woman surrounded by 13 iron spears, her skeleton showing a fractured forearm healed at an angle, proof she'd continued fighting even after injury. What makes these burials revolutionary isn't just the presence of weapons, but their context. Many of these women were buried with the same rituals as male warriors: horses sacrificed beside them, gold ornaments marking their status, even cannabis paraphernalia suggesting participation in rituals. In the Ukraine's Mamai Gora cemetery, over 30% of weapon graves belong to women. Some, like the so-called Golden Warrior Maiden of Kazakhstan, wore gold-plated armor and headdresses adorned with animal motifs, symbols of authority shared by chieftains. Modern science has added startling clarity. DNA analysis of Scythian remains confirms that up to 37% of women from this culture show bone stress markers identical to their male counterparts, evidence of archery, horseback riding, and hand-to-hand combat. Their legs often show the telltale equestrian's ridge, a bony spur caused by gripping horses. One skull from the Altai Mountains revealed a woman who'd survived a battle-axe wound years before her death, her skull surgically trepped and to relieve swelling. These weren't anomalies, they were part of a pattern. The myth of Amazons as man-hating outcasts crumbles when we examine Scythian family burials. In one Kurgan near Rostov, a woman was buried beside her husband, both with weapons, their skeletons interlaced as if holding hands. Another grave contained a mother and daughter, each with their own daggers and arrowheads, suggesting combat skills were passed down generations. Far from rejecting men, these women fought alongside them, a fact that unsettled Greek writers like Herodotus, who insisted Amazons only married foreigners to reproduce before killing them. The 2019 discovery in Russia's Alexandropol Kurgan drove this point home. There, a woman in her 50s was buried with a full set of scale armor, her bones showing decades of healed fractures. Beside her lay a younger man, likely her son, his skeleton mirroring her injuries. The grave goods included a gold pectoral depicting Scythians taming horses, a scene that, we now realize, might have included women as riders. Even their tattoos matched, both bore the same swirling animal motifs, ink needles likely shared between battles. Perhaps the most poignant detail comes from the Ukrainian steppes, where a teenage girl was found buried with a bow and a tiny silver ring. Analysis showed her hands were calloused from archery, yet her ring bore an inscription in Greek, "To my daughter," had it been a gift from a Greek trader. A trophy, or proof that Scythian women moved as fluidly between cultures as they did between roles of warrior and caregiver. These graves force us to reconsider not just Scythian society, but our own biases. The Greeks, who saw warfare as a male domain, mythologized these women as exceptions. In reality, Scythian art often shows women hunting and fighting alongside men without fanfare. A gold plaque from the Hermitage Museum depicts a woman shooting a bow while riding side saddle, a pose requiring immense skill. Another shows a woman handing a spear to a youth, possibly a rites of passage scene. As we re-examine these burials, the Amazons step out of legend and into history, not as manless monsters, but as skilled members of a culture where battle was a duty, not a gender. And just when we think we've grasped the full picture, another twist emerges. High in the Siberian permafrost, recent radar scans suggest an untouched Kurgan, one that might hold the ultimate proof of a warrior queen's reign. But that's a story for another day. For now, we're left with arrowheads, healed bones, and a quiet revolution in how we view the past. Now, let's shift our gaze upward, literally, to a burial practice that defies the earthbound logic of Kurgans. While we've seen Scythians bury their dead with gold, horses, and weapons, Herodotus tells us some took a radically different approach. Imagine a corpse not interred in a mound, but elevated on a wooden scaffold, left exposed to the elements and the beaks of carrion birds. This was the sky burial, a practice that turned death into a celestial journey. The Greek historian describes how certain Scythian groups would construct raised platforms from timber, arranging the deceased atop them with their belongings. Unlike the sealed tombs of elites, these bodies were left unprotected, their flesh devoured by vultures and eagles. To modern eyes, it might seem gruesome, but to the Scythians, this was sacred. The birds weren't scavengers, they were psychopomps, winged guides carrying souls to the heavens. Archaeologists debate whether this reflected Zoroastrian influences, where exposure purified the dead, or an indigenous belief that the sky was the true afterlife realm. Evidence is scarcer than for Kurgans wood decays, but clues remain. In the Pontic steppes, excavations uncovered post holes arranged in circular patterns, matching Herodotus' descriptions of scaffold supports. Nearby, bird bones, particularly those of raptors, were found ritually placed in pits, suggesting veneration. More tellingly, some kurgans contain burials where skeletons lack skulls or limb bones, as if collected after sky exposure for secondary burial. A grave near the Dnieper River held a man's torso adorned with gold, his head and arms conspicuously absent, perhaps retrieved from a platform after birds had done their work. The big question: who received these sky burials? One theory points to lower status individuals. Building a kurgan required immense labor, something only elites could command. Scaffolds, by contrast, needed just a few trees and ropes. Yet nomadic tribes like the Massageti, whom Herodotus specifically mentions practicing sky burials, were far from poor. Their queens wielded power and their warriors wore gold. This suggests the practice wasn't about status but belief. Tribes roaming the open steppes might have seen the sky as their true home, making aerial burial more fitting than interment. Then there's the shamanistic angle. Scythian religion revered birds as messengers between worlds. Golden artifacts depict eagles transforming into griffins, symbols of spiritual ascent. In this light, sky burial wasn't neglect, it was the ultimate honor, a direct ticket to the divine. Compare this to Tibetan sky burials, where vultures are called dakinis or sky dancers. The parallels are striking, hinting at a shared Eurasian vision of death as flight. But controversy lingers. Some scholars argue Herodotus exaggerated, conflating Scythian practices with Persian or Indian customs. Others note that permafrost-preserved tombs like Pazyryk show no evidence of sky exposure, implying it was regional. Yet in 2018, drone surveys in Kazakhstan revealed strange wooden structures atop remote hills, too flimsy for dwellings but perfect for scaffolds. Nearby, soil analysis detected elevated nitrogen levels, consistent with decomposing bodies. Perhaps the truth lies in between. Just as modern cultures mix burial methods, the Scythians may have used both kurgans and scaffolds depending on circumstance. A warrior dying in winter when the ground froze might get a temporary platform burial until spring thaw allowed kurgan construction. Tribes on the move could have seen scaffolds as practical, honoring the dead without anchoring them to one place. The most poignant evidence comes from folklore. Centuries after the Scythians vanished, steppe peoples like the Mongols still told tales of bird burials. One legend describes a chieftain's soul riding an eagle to the sun. That image, a spirit soaring on wings, may be the sky burial's true legacy, not a discard but a release. Not an end, but a transformation as boundless as the sky itself. As we piece together these fragments, another mystery emerges. Recent LiDAR scans in the Caucasus show anomalies: raised wooden platforms buried under later kurgans. Were these scaffolds sealed by time, or did some Scythians combine both practices, sending souls skyward before burying the bones? The answer, like the vultures that once circled these rites, remains just out of reach. Now, let's turn our attention to a burial tradition that proves the Scythians knew how to throw a party, even in the afterlife. While gold and weapons were essential for the journey beyond, the dead were also equipped with something far more festive: copious amounts of alcohol. Picture this: a Scythian noble laid to rest in a kurgan, surrounded not just by treasures, but by towering stacks of amphorae filled with wine and leather pouches brimming with fermented mare's milk known as kumis. These weren't mere grave goods, they were provisions for eternity, reflecting a belief that the afterlife was an endless feast where the deceased would need sustenance just as they did in life. Archaeological finds paint a vivid picture. The Chertomlik Kurgan, one of the most lavish Scythian tombs ever uncovered, held dozens of Greek-made wine amphorae, their surfaces still bearing traces of resin used to seal and flavor the drink. Some vessels were placed at the foot of the burial chamber, as if ready to be uncorked, while others were stacked along the walls like a royal cellar. Analysis of residues revealed that the Scythians favored strong, spiced wines, likely mixed with herbs or honey, a far cry from the watered-down versions preferred by their Greek neighbors. But wine wasn't the only drink of choice. Kumis, a fermented dairy product made from mare's milk, held special significance. For a nomadic culture reliant on horses, this tangy, slightly alcoholic beverage was a staple. Herodotus notes that Scythians would ritually purify themselves by kneeling over hemp smoke, then drink kumis from communal bowls during funerals. Tombs across the Eurasian steppe have yielded leather flasks and wooden cups, some still containing residues of this ancient brew. Why this obsession with stocking tombs with booze? The answer lies in the Scythian concept of hospitality. Just as living guests were welcomed with food and drink, the dead were expected to host or be hosted in the afterlife. Greek historians describe Scythian funerals as raucous affairs, with mourners drinking, feasting, and even competing in games to honor the departed. The grave goods ensured the deceased could continue these traditions beyond the veil. There's also a spiritual layer. Alcohol, especially kumis, was thought to bridge worlds. Shamans used fermented mare's milk in rituals to induce trances, believing it opened pathways to the spirit realm. By burying their dead with these drinks, the Scythians may have been providing them with a tool to navigate the afterlife or to summon divine allies. Not all tombs held equal libations, though. Elite burials boasted imported Greek wines, signaling wealth and connections to distant trade networks. Commoners made do with simpler fare, homemade kumis or local brews. In one mid-status grave near modern-day Ukraine, archaeologists found a single amphora placed carefully beside the body, its base deliberately cracked, perhaps a symbolic opening for the dead to access its contents. The most intriguing evidence comes from permafrost graves like those in Pazyryk, where organic materials survive. Here, traces of cheese and meat were found alongside drinks, suggesting full meals were packed for the journey. One chieftain's burial included a wooden table set with dishes, as if frozen mid-banquet. Modern science has even decoded some of these ancient recipes. Residue analysis shows Scythians sometimes laced their wine with opium or hemp, amplifying its mind-altering effects. This raises a tantalizing possibility that mourners or the dead themselves weren't just toasting to memory, but chemically enhancing communion with the spirit world. The practice wasn't without risks. Looters targeting Scythian Kurgans often ignored gold in favor of alcohol. Herodotus recounts a bizarre incident where Persian soldiers, stumbling upon an abandoned Scythian burial, got violently ill after drinking cursed tomb wine. Scholars now suspect arsenic in the resin sealant was to blame, a poison meant to deter thieves. Today, these liquid offerings offer a unique window into Scythian life. Wine amphorae bear Greek makers' marks, revealing trade routes. Kumis residues show domestication patterns of ancient horse breeds. Even the cracks and stains on drinking vessels hint at funeral rituals. Was this cup passed hand to hand? Was that one buried full as a gift? What's clear is that for the Scythians, death wasn't a sober affair. Whether it was the finest Thracian wine or humble kumis, alcohol was as vital as any weapon or golden mask. Because in the end, they weren't just preparing for an afterlife, they were ensuring it would be a celebration. And speaking of celebrations, our next discovery takes us from the feasting halls of the dead to something far more enigmatic. Graves where the corpses weren't just buried, but meticulously tattooed with beasts and symbols. These weren't mere decorations, they were a language of the skin, a map to the other side. Now, let's shift our focus to a burial practice that turns human skin into an ancient canvas, where the dead weren't just buried, but adorned with intricate tattoos that told stories beyond the grave. Unlike modern ink, these designs weren't mere decoration. They were a visual language etched into flesh to serve a purpose far deeper than aesthetics. Imagine uncovering a 2,000-year-old body in Siberia's frozen earth. only to find its skin still vibrant with tattoos of snarling panthers, coiled griffins, and mythical stags with antlers twisting like tree branches. That's exactly what happened with the Pazyryk chieftain, one of the most famous tattooed Scythian mummies ever discovered. His preserved body, pulled from the permafrost of the Altai Mountains, revealed a breathtaking gallery of animal motifs stretching from his shoulders to his ankles. The ink was made from soot and fat, punched into the skin with bone needles, a technique so precise. The details still astonish archaeologists today, but why go through such pain? For the Scythians, tattoos weren't just personal expression. They were badges of identity, rank, and even supernatural armor. The recurring animal motifs, predatory cats, birds of prey, and hybrid creatures mirror the gold figurines found in their graves. This wasn't coincidence. These beasts were spiritual guardians, believed to offer protection in life and guidance in death. The chieftain's tattoos, for example, featured a fish symbol running down his spine, a possible charm against evil spirits or a marker of his lineage. The placement of the ink tells its own story. Many tattoos cluster around joints, wrists, knees, and ankles, areas vulnerable in battle. Some scholars argue this was magical thinking, that tattooing a protective beast over a weak spot would literally shield the wearer. Others suggest these were rites of passage. The more tattoos, the more proven the warrior. A young Scythian might start with a single design, adding more after each battle or ritual achievement. Women weren't excluded from this practice. The Ice Maiden, another famed Pazyryk mummy, bore elaborate tattoos of deer with curling antlers on her shoulders. Unlike the chieftain's aggressive motifs, her designs were more graceful, hinting at different symbolic meanings, perhaps fertility or a connection to forest spirits. The fact that high-status women were tattooed just as boldly as men challenges stereotypes about ancient gender roles. These weren't hidden marks, they were proudly displayed even in death. The process itself was ritualistic. Ethnographic accounts of Siberian tribes, descendants of the Scythians, describe tattooing as a sacred act accompanied by chanting or herbal smoke. The pain was part of the transformation, a way to awaken the design's power. Some tattoos might have been applied during trances, with shamans guiding the needle. This could explain why certain patterns, like interlocking spirals, resemble hallucinogenic visions. Not all tattoos were mystical, though. Some likely denoted clan affiliations or achievements. A stag might symbolize a successful hunt, while a griffin could mark membership in an elite warrior band. In a culture without written language, skin became a living resume. When buried, these tattoos acted as a permanent introduction to the afterlife, no golden mask needed. The pigments tell another tale. Analysis shows some inks contained copper, giving them a subtle blue-green hue under certain light. Was this intentional? Could these tattoos have glowed in firelit rituals, making the wearer seem otherworldly? It's a chilling possibility. Even more intriguing are the abstract patterns, dots, lines, and geometric shapes found on lesser-known mummies. These might have served as a code, mapping constellations or ancestral journeys. Modern recreations reveal the skill involved. Artists using replica bone needles found it took hours to complete even small sections. The Scythians clearly valued patience and endurance, qualities that mirrored their nomadic resilience. And because tattoos were preserved by permafrost, we're seeing them exactly as they were in life, unfaded by time. What's haunting is how these designs echo across cultures. Similar animal motifs appear in Scythian goldwork, Celtic metalwork, and even Norse carvings. Were they part of a shared Indo-European visual language, or independent inventions reflecting universal human fascinations? Either way, the tattoos prove the Scythians were part of a vast, interconnected world. One mystery remains: why some elite burials lack tattoos entirely. Was ink reserved for certain ranks or ages, or did some individuals refuse the needle for spiritual reasons? The answer may lie in the tattoos we haven't found, those on unpreserved skin, lost to decay. As we move from the art of the body to the art of the grave, our next stop takes us underground, to burial mounds so massive they reshape the landscape itself. These weren't just tombs, they were statements in earth and timber declaring dominion even in death. Now, let's step into a shadowy corner of Scythian lore where the glitter of gold comes with a whisper of danger. For centuries, their tombs have been rumored to guard their treasures with more than just earth and stone. Some say they're protected by something far more sinister, a curse. Take the case of a group of treasure hunters who broke into a kurgan in southern Russia in the 1990s. Within months, one fell ill with a mysterious wasting sickness, another died in a freak accident, and a third reportedly took his own life. Locals swore it was the vengeance of the Scythian dead, but science offers another explanation. Many Scythian gold artifacts contain high levels of arsenic, a toxic metal they likely used to harden the alloy. Prolonged exposure, especially in poorly ventilated tombs, could have caused slow poisoning. Modern looters handling these objects without protection might have inhaled or absorbed enough arsenic to trigger symptoms resembling a curse. The Greeks fueled these fears. Herodotus wrote that the Scythians buried their kings with spells to punish trespassers, and later historians like Strabo described gold guarding griffins, mythical creatures that may have been metaphors for the real dangers lurking in the tombs. Even the Scythians themselves might have believed in their gold's power. Some daggers and cups bear inscriptions scholars think are protective incantations. Then there's the psychological angle. The sheer weight of superstition can be deadly. In 2009, a Ukrainian archaeologist cataloging looted artifacts suffered a heart attack after joking about ignoring the curse. Coincidence perhaps, but the mind is a powerful thing. Many Kurgans were designed to unsettle, with false corridors, hidden pits, or decoy chambers meant to disorient. Combine that with eerie animal figurines staring from the shadows, and it's easy to see how panic could take root. Modern forensic studies add another layer. Some Scythian burial items, like ceremonial mirrors, contain cinnabar, a mercury-based pigment. Disturbing these could release toxic vapors. One theory suggests shamans deliberately placed such objects as traps, knowing the sickness would deter thieves. But not all curses are chemical. In 2018, a Kazakh farmer plowing near a kurgan unearthed gold ornaments, and within weeks his crops failed and livestock died. Scientists found no toxins. Instead, the land had been salted, an ancient practice to render soil barren, possibly by the Scythians themselves as a final gift to grave robbers. The most chilling evidence comes from artifacts themselves. A golden pectoral from the Tolstaya Mogila kurgan shows a scene of underworld judgment where figures, perhaps doomed looters, are torn apart by beasts. Was this a warning or a belief that justice followed beyond death? Today, museums handle Scythian gold with gloves, not just for preservation. Some curators admit to a lingering unease. After all, science can explain arsenic poisoning, but it can't shake the stories like the guard at the Hermitage Museum who claimed a Scythian diadem moved on its own, or the odd equipment malfunctions during CT scans of mummies. Yet the real curse might be greed itself. Many looted artifacts vanish into private collections, stripping them of their history. The Scythians, who so carefully prepared for eternity, couldn't have foreseen their treasures being torn from context. Maybe the true punishment isn't death or illness, but losing one's story to time. From curses to chemistry, the dangers of Scythian gold remind us that some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered. And as we turn next to their frozen tombs, where time itself stands still, we'll see how ice preserved more than just bodies, it kept entire worlds intact. But beyond the whispers of curses and gold, the Scythians left behind something far more extraordinary, a glimpse into their world frozen literally in time. High in the Altai Mountains, where Siberia's permafrost grips the earth like an unyielding hand, Their tombs became accidental time machines. Picture this, a burial chamber sealed for over 2,000 years, its contents so perfectly preserved that archaeologists found hunks of cheese still resting beside the dead, and felt rugs vibrant with color as if woven yesterday. The star of these icy vaults is the Yukok Plateau, a windswept stretch of wilderness where temperatures plunge so low that decay simply stops. Here in 1993, researchers uncovered the now famous Ice Maiden, a tattooed Scythian noblewoman buried in a larchwood coffin. The permafrost had frozen her body so completely that even the delicate blue tattoos of mythical creatures on her skin remained sharp, as if inked weeks rather than millennia ago. But it wasn't just her. Beside her lay a meal for the afterlife, a dish of sheep's cheese so intact that scientists could still analyze its bacteria. Imagine uncovering a snack meant for the dead, only to realize it's the world's oldest surviving dairy product. Then there are the chariots. In the Pazyryk Valley, permafrost preserved entire ceremonial wagons with wheels, harnesses, and even woven textiles still draped over the frames. These weren't just functional vehicles, they were masterpieces of nomadic engineering, with rotating axle systems and intricate carvings of griffins and elk. The cold kept the wood from warping, the leather from cracking, and the dyes from fading. One chariot's decorative felt hangings showed a procession of lions, their manes detailed stitch by stitch, a level of preservation unheard of in warmer climates. But how permafrost acts like nature's deep freezer. When Scythians dug their burial pits, they inadvertently tapped into a natural preservation system. The tombs were lined with logs, stuffed with insulating layers of felt and bark, then covered by stone mounds. Over time, rainwater seeped in, froze, and created ice lenses, thick layers of ice that expanded to seal the chambers airtight. No oxygen meant no bacteria to break down organic materials. Even the horse sacrifices buried alongside the dead retained their mane braids and patterned felt saddles. Scientists found one stallion with a leather mask adorned with antlers, likely used in ritual disguises. The real shock came when they analyzed the contents of wooden vessels left in these tombs. Some held traces of cannabis and opium, suggesting the Scythians didn't just preserve their dead, they stocked their graves with psychotropics for the journey ahead. Other jars contained fermented mare's milk or kumis, a drink still consumed in Central Asia today. Perhaps the most haunting find was a carpet from the Pazyryk tombs, now considered the oldest piled rug in existence. Its vivid reds and golds depict riders and stags, a snapshot of Scythian mythology frozen mid-thread. Normally, textiles this old survive only as fragments, but here was an entire rug, its knots still tight, its patterns telling stories we're only beginning to decipher. These frozen tombs didn't just preserve objects, they preserved moments. A wooden table set with roasted sheep ribs and a knife beside it, as if the deceased might rise to eat. A felt swan stuffed with grass placed as a companion in death. Even the bodies themselves hold clues. The Ice Maiden's headdress, nearly 3 feet tall, still stands upright, its wooden pins and golden adornments intact. But time's grip is slipping. Climate change now threatens these icy vaults. As temperatures rise, permafrost melts, and artifacts that survived millennia begin to rot within years of exposure. Archaeologists race against thawing soils, knowing each tomb they open might be the last to surrender its secrets so perfectly. What these frozen graves teach us is that the Scythians didn't just bury their dead, they sent them forward, equipped with everything they'd need, trusting the cold to keep their world alive. And in the silence of the ice, we're left with a question. Were these tombs meant to be opened, or were they sealed with the hope that no one would ever disturb their eternal feast? As we move from the frozen highlands to the bustling underworld of Scythian belief, we'll explore how they staged death as the ultimate banquet, a celebration without end. Shifting from the silent preservation of ice-bound tombs, we arrive at a Scythian funeral tradition pulsing with movement and community, the two-stage burial. According to Herodotus, when a Scythian king or noble died, their body wouldn't be laid to rest immediately. Instead, it embarked on a final journey, carried in procession from tribe to tribe for 40 days. Picture a summer parade crossing the steppes, the deceased's body prepared with fragrant herbs and wax, visited by mourners who feasted, wept, and paid respects in each settlement. This wasn't just a funeral, it was a mobile ritual stitching together a scattered nomadic people. Why 40 days? The number held deep significance across ancient cultures, often symbolizing transformation or purification. For the Scythians, this prolonged farewell may have served two practical purposes. First, it allowed time for embalming. Unlike the Egyptians who removed organs, Scythian embalmers reportedly cleaned the body with hemp and cedar resins, then stuffed the cavity with crushed cypress, incense, and parsley seeds, a mix that masked decay and possibly slowed it. Transporting the body during this process would have let the embalming agents work while keeping the corpse away from living spaces. Second, this journey reinforced political alliances. Each tribe that hosted the procession likely exchanged gifts or pledged loyalty, turning grief into a tool of unity. Herodotus notes that the Scythians would gash their arms and faces in mourning, a visceral display of shared pain. Imagine the message sent when a dozen tribes, each with their own leaders, all participated in these bloody lamentations. It was diplomacy written in scars. Archaeology hints at this practice's authenticity. While no mobile corpses survive, some kurgans contain multiple burial layers, suggesting bodies were temporarily stored elsewhere before final interment. At the Chertomlik mound, for instance, excavators found an outer chamber with scattered horse bones and pottery, possibly remnants of feasts held during the 40-day rite, before reaching the central tomb where the king's embalmed body lay surrounded by weapons and gold. The procession also had a spiritual dimension. By circling tribal lands, the dead may have been symbolically presented to local spirits or ancestors, ensuring safe passage to the afterlife. Some scholars compare it to the Zoroastrian Sagdid ritual, where a dog was led past a corpse to ward off evil. The Scythians' route might have similarly purified the landscape, with the body acting as a conduit between worlds. But this tradition wasn't without risks. Transporting a decomposing body across vast distances in warm months could have invited disease. The Scythians likely offset this by using airtight coffins or carts lined with antimicrobial materials like felt and beeswax. A few tombs contained charcoal layers, suggesting fires were lit to fumigate the deceased during stops. The climax of this ritual was dramatic. After 40 days, the body reached its final resting place, where the Scythians would kill 50 strangled horses and riders to accompany it, a grim escort service. The scale of these sacrifices implies the two-stage funeral wasn't just about mourning, but showcasing power. A king whose death could command weeks of tribute from distant tribes proved his legacy in life. What makes this practice eerily modern is its emphasis on closure. Unlike hurried burials, the prolonged goodbye let communities process loss collectively. Today, we hold wakes or memorial services. The Scythians turned their entire empire into a funeral hall. As we'll see next, their view of death wasn't all solemnity. It could also be a feast lasting eternally. Now let's confront one of the most chilling rumors about the Scythians, one that blurs the line between ritual and horror: the whispers of cannibalism. Greek historians like Herodotus claimed that during royal funerals, Scythians would consume the flesh of their dead kings. It's a grotesque image, but how much of it was truth, and how much was sensationalized storytelling from outsiders looking to demonize their nomadic rivals? To unravel this, we need to dissect the Greek accounts with a critical eye. Herodotus writes that after the 40-day procession, mourners would cleanse themselves in a steam bath infused with hemp, then cut off a portion of the deceased king's flesh, mix it with chopped meat, and eat it. But here's the catch: archaeology hasn't found a single shred of evidence confirming actual cannibalism in Scythian graves. No cut marks on bones, no tools for butchering humans, nothing. So why did the Greeks insist on this grisly detail? One theory points to cultural misunderstanding. The Scythians were known for elaborate funeral feasts where symbolic acts might have been misinterpreted by Greek observers. Imagine a ritual where mourners shared meat from sacrificed animals, perhaps shaped or presented in ways that evoked the king's body, like a loaf of bread molded into a human form or a haunch of meat designated as a stand-in for the deceased. To an outsider, this could easily twist into tales of literal consumption. There's precedent for this in other ancient cultures. The Aztecs, for instance, made dough figurines of gods for ritual eating, a practice Spaniards later exaggerated into claims of human sacrifice. Another angle is political slander. The Greeks often painted the Scythians as barbarians to justify their own expansion into Scythian territories. Cannibalism was a common trope in ancient propaganda used to dehumanize enemies. If the Scythians were flesh-eaters, then conquering them became a moral duty. Yet, ironically, some Greek city-states had their own rituals involving symbolic cannibalism, like the Athenian Thesmophoria, where women ate cakes shaped like genitals to honor Demeter. But let's not dismiss the possibility of a symbolic ritual entirely. The Scythians might have engaged in a form of spiritual cannibalism, where consuming food representing the dead transferred their power or wisdom to the living. Siberian tribes, for example, practiced rituals where they ate tiny portions of a revered shaman's ashes to inherit his knowledge. If the Scythians did something similar, say, swallowing a pinch of herbs or ash from the king's funeral pyre, it would align with their shamanistic beliefs without crossing into literal cannibalism. The strongest counterargument comes from Scythian burial sites themselves. Kings were meticulously embalmed and buried with care, not dismembered or butchered. In fact, many elite tombs show signs of reverence: gold masks, untouched ceremonial weapons, suggesting the dead were honored, not consumed. Even the Pazyryk, Ice Maiden, preserved for over 2,000 years, shows no signs of post-mortem mutilation beyond embalming cuts. So where does this leave us? The cannibalism claims likely say more about Greek fears than Scythian practices. But buried in the exaggeration might be a kernel of truth, a ritual so alien to Mediterranean observers that they could only describe it as monstrous. Perhaps the Scythians did share a symbolic meal to bind themselves to their dead leaders, a communion of memory rather than flesh. This brings us to another curious blend of myth and reality: the medieval legend of the Scythian lamb, a plant said to grow from their tombs. But that's a story for next time. Now, let's wander into the realm of myth and botany, where medieval imaginations transformed Scythian burial customs into something straight out of a fairy tale. Picture this: a plant sprouting from the earth, not with leaves or flowers, but with the woolly body of a lamb tethered to the soil by a stem like an umbilical cord. This was the legendary Scythian lamb, a creature plant hybrid said to grow from the tombs of their dead. The myth first took root in medieval European texts, where travelers and scholars spun wild tales of the distant, mysterious East. According to these accounts, the Scythian lamb, or barometz as it was sometimes called, was a living paradox, part animal, part vegetable, grazing on the grass around it until predators or time severed its stem, causing it to wither and die. Some even claimed its blood had medicinal properties, or that its wool was harvested for rare textiles. But how did such a bizarre legend attach itself to the Scythians, a people who had vanished centuries before these stories emerged? The answer lies in a tangled knot of cultural confusion and real botanical practices. Archaeologists have found that the Scythians did, in fact, bury seeds and plants with their dead not as mystical hybrids, but as practical offerings for the afterlife. Tombs contained traces of hemp, barley, and even wild roses, suggesting a belief that the deceased might need sustenance or comfort in the next world. But medieval Europeans, encountering descriptions of these practices second or third hand, likely conflated them with the unfamiliar flora of the steppes. One prime suspect behind the myth is the cotton plant. When Scythian Kurgans were looted in later centuries, explorers might have stumbled upon fragments of cotton textiles or the plant's fluffy balls, mistaking them for tufts of wool. Cotton was virtually unknown in medieval Europe at the time, so it's easy to see how an imaginative mind could leap from strange white fibers to sheep growing from the ground. Another candidate is the fern Sabotium barometes, whose rhizomes' thick, hairy underground stems resemble a lamb's fleece when dried. Traders along the Silk Road could have carried these roots westward, where their unusual appearance fueled the legend. But the Scythian lamb wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. It also reflected deeper anxieties and fascinations. For medieval Christians, the idea of a plant-animal hybrid blurred the God-ordained boundaries between species, making it both monstrous and miraculous. Some theologians even linked it to the vegetable lamb of Tartary, a supposed proof of divine creativity. Meanwhile, for herbalists and alchemists, the myth hinted at hidden natural wonders waiting to be discovered in far-off lands, a theme that would later drive the age of exploration. What's fascinating is how this folklore obscured the real sophistication of Scythian burial botany. In the frozen tombs of Pazyryk, for instance, researchers found carpets woven with cannabis fibers, pillows stuffed with aromatic grasses, and even bundles of ephedra, a plant with stimulant properties. These weren't just random offerings, they were carefully chosen to serve specific roles in the afterlife, from providing warmth to aiding in rituals. The Scythians may have believed plants carried spiritual potency, much like their animal totems. So why does the Scythian lamb endure? Because it's a testament to how easily fact can morph into legend when cultures collide. The real Scythians didn't grow sheep from their graves, but they did sow the seeds of stories that would outlast their empire by centuries. And that, in its own way, is a kind of immortality. Next, we turn to a practice that's equally bound by oath and blood, the enigmatic warrior's death pact, where loyalty extended even beyond the grave. Now, let's step into the shadowy world of Scythian warrior bonds, where loyalty wasn't just sworn in life, it was sealed in death. Among the most haunting discoveries in Scythian archaeology are the paired male burials, where two warriors lie side by side, often with identical weapons and injuries that tell a story of unbreakable oaths. These graves suggest a dark and deeply personal ritual, the warrior's death pact, a vow that bound men not just in battle but in the afterlife. Take the Alexandropol Kurgan, a massive burial mound in modern-day Ukraine. When archaeologists uncovered it, they found twin skeletons laid together, each equipped with nearly identical weaponry, a short sword, a quiver of arrows, and a spear. Both bore similar wounds, hinting at violent deaths, but the real mystery was their positioning. They weren't crumpled as if fallen in combat, but arranged carefully, almost ceremonially. One theory, these men were blood brothers who pledged to follow each other into death. The concept of a blood brother oath wasn't unique to the Scythians, but their version took it to an extreme. Greek historians like Herodotus wrote of Scythian warriors mingling their blood with wine and drinking it, a symbolic act of unity, but for some, the bond went further. If one brother died, the survivor might take his own life to fulfill the pact. This wasn't mere suicide, it was a sacred duty, a way to ensure they'd fight together in the afterlife as they had in life. Why would warriors make such a grim promise? In the brutal world of the steppes, where tribes clashed and survival depended on trust, these pacts forged unshakable alliances. A blood brother was more than a comrade, he was a second self. In death, that bond became a ticket to the warrior's paradise the Scythians believed awaited them, a realm where the brave feasted eternally. The paired burials might also have served a practical purpose, discouraging betrayal. If deserting your brother meant damning your own soul, the stakes were impossibly high. But not all paired burials fit this theory. Some graves show one skeleton with signs of a violent death and the other with no visible wounds, suggesting the second man might have been killed to accompany the first. Was this voluntary, or were some brothers actually retainers, sacrificed to serve their lord beyond the grave? The line between devotion and coercion blurs here. In the Chertumlic Kurgan, for example, a high-ranking warrior was buried with a younger man, possibly a squire or apprentice. Did he go willingly, or was his death an act of forced loyalty? The weapons in these graves add another layer of intrigue. Matching sets of arms like those in the Alexandropol tomb imply the men were equals, reinforcing the blood brother idea. But other paired burials contain asymmetrical gear, one man with a chieftain's gold-tipped bow, the other with simpler tools. This could reflect different ranks where the follower's death was obligatory, not chosen. What's clear is that these pacts, whether sworn or imposed, reveal the Scythians' obsession with honor and continuity. Death wasn't an end but a transition, and entering the next world alone was unthinkable for a true warrior. Even today, these silent graves speak volumes about the extremes of brotherhood, where loyalty didn't end with a last breath but echoed into eternity. Next, we dive into a mystery that stretches beneath the waves, the Black Sea's drowned kings, where water may have been a gateway to the underworld. Now, let's plunge into the depths of the Black Sea, where the Scythians took their burial rituals to haunting new levels literally beneath the waves. Off the coast of Crimea, archaeologists have uncovered submerged Kurgans, raising the eerie possibility that some Scythian elites were laid to rest in what they might have seen as a watery gateway to the afterlife. Recent sonar scans have revealed strange, mound-like structures resting on the seabed, their shapes unmistakably echoing the Kurgans found on land. These underwater tombs, some dating back 2,500 years, suggest a deliberate choice, one that may have been tied to the Scythians' beliefs about the underworld. Unlike the towering burial mounds of the steppes, these sunken graves sit silently in the dark, their secrets preserved by the sea. Why would the Scythians bury their dead underwater? For a culture that saw the afterlife as a reflection of their nomadic existence, water could have symbolized a final, uncharted journey. Some scholars theorize that the Black Sea's depths represented a sacred threshold, a place where the souls of the elite could cross into the realm of the dead. Others point to practical reasons. Rising sea levels over centuries may have swallowed coastal burial sites, though the deliberate placement of some Kurgans near ancient shorelines hints at intentionality. One of the most compelling underwater discoveries came in 2018, when a team surveying the Crimean coast detected a cluster of submerged mounds near the port city of Kerch. The largest measured over 30 meters wide, its structure mirroring the elaborate timber chambers of land-based Kurgans. While excavation is challenging underwater, dredging has brought up fragments of gold and pottery, suggesting these were no ordinary graves but resting places for the noble or the revered. The connection to Scythian mythology deepens when we consider their neighbors, the Greeks, who viewed the Black Sea as the edge of the known world, a place of mystery and danger. The Scythians may have shared this perception, seeing the sea as a liminal space where the living and the dead could commune. Ancient texts hint at rituals involving water offerings, and the placement of these Kurgans might have been part of a broader tradition of honoring the dead through submersion. Yet mysteries remain. Were these underwater tombs reserved for kings, or did they serve another purpose? Some researchers speculate they could be cenotaphs, symbolic graves for warriors lost at sea, ensuring their spirits weren't left to wander. The presence of horse bones in nearby coastal Kurgans adds weight to this idea, as if the drowned were sent off with the same sacrifices as their land-bound counterparts. The Black Sea's anoxic waters, lacking oxygen below certain depths, have preserved organic materials in ways land burials couldn't. Imagine the potential: intact textiles, untouched weapons, even the remnants of funerary feasts, all waiting in the silent dark. Each discovery from these drowned Kurgans peels back another layer of Scythian spirituality, showing a people who didn't just fear death but sought to master its rituals, even in the most unexpected places. As we surface from these depths, we're reminded that the Scythians' burial practices were as vast and varied as the landscapes they roamed, from towering mounds to hidden seabed tombs. Next, we'll step into another world entirely, where death wasn't an end but an eternal feast. Now, let's turn our attention from the depths of the Black Sea to the lavish tombs where death was transformed into an endless celebration. Picture this, a Scythian chieftain, seated not in solemn silence but at a table overflowing with food and drink, surrounded by the finest treasures, as though the afterlife were one grand, unending feast. This was the eternal banquet, a burial practice that turned tombs into something resembling a royal dining hall frozen in time. Archaeologists have uncovered kurgans with layouts so meticulously arranged they defy the grim expectations of death. In places like the Chertomlik and Soloka mounds, the deceased were placed at the center of wooden chambers, propped up as if presiding over a banquet. Tables were laden with roasted meats, bowls of fermented mare's milk, and amphorae filled with wine imported from Greece. Golden goblets, intricately carved dishes, and even remnants of cheese and honey were found alongside them, suggesting the Scythians believed the dead needed sustenance for their journey, or perhaps that they'd continue feasting forever. But why this obsession with turning graves into dining rooms? The answer may lie in the Scythians' contact with Zoroastrian traditions from Persia. Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest religions, taught that the soul's journey didn't end with death but transitioned into a new existence. Feasting rituals were central to their funerary practices, symbolizing the soul's reunion with the divine. The Scythians, ever the cultural magpies, likely blended these ideas with their own nomadic customs, creating a unique vision of the afterlife as a perpetual celebration of abundance. The symbolism runs deeper than mere imitation. For a people who spent their lives on horseback, traversing vast steppes where food could be scarce, a tomb stocked with provisions was the ultimate luxury. It reflected their deepest desires: prosperity, hospitality, and the assurance that no one, not even in death, would go hungry. Some tombs even contained miniature cauldrons and skewers, as if the deceased might grill meat in the afterlife. This wasn't just burial, it was wishful thinking carved into eternity. One of the most striking examples comes from the Alexandropol Kurgan in modern-day Ukraine. Here, excavators found a chieftain surrounded by a literal feast, the skeletons of servants positioned as if serving him, their hands still holding plates and pitchers. Nearby, the bones of horses and dogs, animals often sacrificed for such banquets, lay as though they'd just been butchered for the meal. The scene was so vivid, it's easy to imagine the laughter, the clinking of cups, the smoky aroma of roasted meat hanging in the air. Yet this practice wasn't just about indulgence. The eternal banquet also served a political purpose. By burying leaders amid such opulence, the Scythians reinforced social hierarchies, reminding the living of the elite's divine right to rule even after death. The grandeur of these tombs acted as a territorial marker, a statement of power that said, "We were here and we mattered." Interestingly, not all eternal banquets were for the elite. Smaller kurgans, likely belonging to warriors or lesser nobles, have revealed simpler versions of the same idea: a single cup of kumis, a loaf of bread, a knife for cutting meat. This suggests the belief in an afterlife feast was widespread, a comfort to all levels of Scythian society. The legacy of these banquets lingers in unexpected ways. Modern Central Asian cultures still practice memorial feasts for the dead, where families gather to eat and drink in honor of their ancestors. It's a poignant echo of the Scythian belief that death wasn't an end but a transition, one best faced with a full stomach and a raised glass. As we leave these spirited tombs behind, we're reminded that the Scythians didn't just bury their dead, they threw them a party. But next, we'll venture into a practice where death wasn't marked by celebration but by something far more ingenious: engineering. Ice block lenses, permafrost, and the secrets of preserving life long after it's ended await us. Moving from the warmth of eternal banquets to the chilling genius of Siberian tombs, we now uncover how the Scythians turned ice into their greatest ally against decay. Picture a burial chamber not just buried in snow, but designed with its ingenious ice block lenses meticulously placed to manipulate temperature and preserve the dead with almost supernatural precision. The Permafrost culture, a subgroup of the Scythians who roamed the Altai Mountains, mastered this technique. Their Kurgans, often perched in high valleys, were constructed with layers of stone, logs, and ice blocks arranged in a specific pattern. These weren't accidental preservation pits but deliberate refrigerators of the ancient world. The ice lenses' thick slabs, strategically positioned above and around burial chambers, acted like natural cold traps. Here's the science behind it. As air circulated, moisture would condense and freeze on these ice blocks, creating a microclimate that hovered just below freezing year-round. This slow, steady cold slowed bacterial growth, delaying decomposition for centuries. One of the most stunning examples is the Yukok Plateau, where permafrost and human engineering colluded to create time capsules. The tomb of the famed Ice Maiden, discovered in the 1990s, revealed a woman clad in intricate clothing, her tattoos still vibrant, surrounded by preserved wood carvings and even remnants of a meal. The ice lenses here worked so effectively that archaeologists found cheese still intact after 2,500 years. This wasn't luck. The Scythians had observed how ice and earth interacted in their environment and harnessed it to defy time. But how exactly did these lenses function like prehistoric freezers? The key lay in insulation and airflow. The tombs were built with air vents or gaps between stones, allowing cold air to sink and warm air to rise, a passive cooling system that mimicked modern refrigeration principles. The ice blocks, often layered with moss or felt for added insulation, acted as thermal buffers. Even in summer, when surface temperatures rose, the buried ice stayed frozen, creating a stable environment that protected organic materials from the ravages of decay. The preservation was so exceptional that it offers us snapshots of Scythian life no ordinary grave could. In the Permafrost tombs, researchers recovered felt rugs dyed with vivid patterns, wooden chariots with intact wheels, and even a harp made from animal sinew and wood. These finds weren't just artifacts, they were echoes of a living culture, frozen mid-breath. Yet the Scythians likely didn't grasp the full physics behind their ice lenses. To them, it may have been spiritual as much as practical. In a land where winter dominated, ice was both a barrier and a bridge between worlds. By incorporating it into tombs, they might have believed they were gifting the dead a sliver of eternity, a way to remain alive in memory and form. Modern science has since unraveled their accidental brilliance. Studies of these tombs have influenced cryopreservation techniques, proving that the Scythians were unwitting pioneers of cold storage. But there's a tragic irony. As climate change thaws permafrost, these once eternal tombs are now at risk. The same ice that preserved them for millennia is melting, threatening to erase these fragile windows into the past. What's perhaps most haunting is how these ice lenses blur the line between burial and suspension. The dead weren't just interred, they were held in a liminal state, neither fully gone nor fully faded. It's a testament to the Scythians' creativity that their solution to decay feels so eerily modern. Now, as we leave these frozen vaults behind, we'll step into a practice where the boundary between life and death isn't marked by ice but by illusion, wooden partitions that lead nowhere, beckoning the dead toward a mystery even the Scythians might not have fully understood. Leaving behind the frozen silence of the ice lenses, we now encounter something far more enigmatic: doorways that don't lead anywhere. Deep within Scythian burial mounds, archaeologists have stumbled upon wooden partitions, meticulously crafted yet utterly functionless. These so-called false doors stand as eerie invitations to nowhere, and their purpose reveals a fascinating glimpse into how the Scythians envisioned the journey beyond death. Imagine walking through a Kurgan, torch in hand, only to find a doorway that opens into solid earth. To modern eyes, it seems like a cruel joke, but to the Scythians, these false doors likely served as spiritual thresholds. Unlike the practical ice lenses, these structures weren't about preserving the body. They were about guiding the soul. Scholars suggest these partitions symbolized a boundary between the living world and the underworld, a portal the dead could cross but the living could not follow. It's a concept that echoes across ancient cultures, from the false doors in Egyptian tombs meant to allow the ka, or spirit, to pass through, to the Mesopotamian ziggurats with their symbolic stairways to the gods. The Scythian version, however, carries its own nomadic twist. These weren't grand stone edifices but humble wooden screens, often adorned with carvings of animals or celestial symbols. In the Chertomlik Kurgan, for instance, a false door was found flanked by figures of stags, animals the Scythians associated with the sun and rebirth. This suggests the door wasn't just a barrier but a conduit, a place where the soul could begin its transformation. Unlike the Egyptians, who believed the dead needed physical sustenance in the afterlife, the Scythians may have viewed these doors as purely symbolic, a representation of the moment the soul shed its earthly ties. What makes these false doors especially intriguing is how they reflect the Scythians' adaptability. Nomads by nature, they borrowed and reshaped ideas from settled civilizations they encountered. The similarity to Egyptian false doors isn't a coincidence. Trade routes connected the Scythians to the Black Sea Greeks, who'd interacted with Egypt for centuries. Yet the Scythians stripped the concept down to its essence, replacing pyramids with portable wooden frames that suited their mobile lifestyle. It's a reminder that even in death, they remained practical innovators. But why go to the trouble of building a door that leads nowhere? One theory points to shamanistic rituals. Scythian shamans were said to traverse the spirit world during trances, and these doors could have been ceremonial markers for such journeys. Another possibility is that they were meant to confuse malevolent spirits, tricking them into believing the tomb was inaccessible. Or perhaps, like the shattered mirrors we'll explore later, they were deliberately incomplete, symbolizing the irreversible nature of death. The false doors also challenge our understanding of Scythian cosmology. Unlike the Greeks or Egyptians, the Scythians left no written records of their beliefs. Every interpretation is a puzzle pieced together from grave goods and outsider accounts. These doors might represent a fleeting moment in their spiritual evolution, a practice that faded as they encountered new cultures or as their own traditions shifted. What's undeniable is their emotional resonance. Standing before one of these false doors today, you can almost feel the intention behind it, the hope, the uncertainty, the silent plea for safe passage. They're a testament to a universal human urge to mark the unknown with something familiar, even if that something is a door that never opens. As we step away from these enigmatic thresholds, we'll next uncover how the Scythians turned the very skins of animals into sacred vessels for the dead, blurring the line between coffin and home. Moving from the mystery of false doors, we now encounter a burial practice that speaks to the heart of Scythian identity, their profound connection to animals, not just in life but also in death. Among the most intimate and practical of their funerary customs were the animal skin coffins, where the deceased were carefully sewn into the hollowed-out hides of horses or cattle. This wasn't merely a burial method, it was a poetic echo of their nomadic existence, a final act of weaving the familiar into the unknown. Picture a Scythian warrior wrapped in the very skin of the animals that sustained his people. The hides were meticulously prepared, stripped of flesh but left intact, transforming into a rudimentary yet deeply symbolic coffin. These weren't just containers for decay, they were makeshift dwellings mirroring the yurts that dotted the Scythian steppes. Just as a yurt's felt walls shielded its inhabitants from the biting winds, these hides cradled the dead, offering a semblance of home in the afterlife. Archaeologists have uncovered striking examples like the Pazyryk burials in Siberia, where nobles were found encased in horse hides, their bodies curled as if in sleep. The choice of horsehide wasn't accidental. Horses were the lifeblood of Scythian culture, central to their warfare, trade, and mythology. By cloaking the dead in this sacred material, the Scythians may have been ensuring their kin retained a steed in the spirit world, one last companion for the journey ahead. Cattle hides, meanwhile, carried their own significance, likely tied to fertility or sustenance in the afterlife, given their role in providing milk and meat. The craftsmanship of these coffins reveals much about Scythian pragmatism. Unlike the gold-adorned elites we've discussed earlier, this practice appears across social tiers, suggesting a shared belief in the comforting presence of animal skins. Some hides were stitched with sinew, others adorned with simple patterns or even painted, blurring the line between function and artistry. In a way, these coffins were the ultimate nomadic innovation, portable, durable, and deeply personal. But why did the Scythians favor this method over wooden caskets or stone tombs? The answer lies in their transient lifestyle. Wood was often scarce on the steppes and stone too heavy to transport. Animal hides, however, were readily available, a byproduct of their daily survival. More than that, they carried spiritual weight. Many ancient cultures viewed skins as vessels of transformation. Think of the Norse legend of the god Loki turning into a mare, or Native American rituals involving buffalo robes. For the Scythians, the act of being sewn into an animal's hide might have symbolized rebirth, a shedding of the human form to take on new attributes in the next world. The parallels to their yurts are impossible to ignore. Just as a yurt's circular frame represented the cosmos, these skin coffins may have been microcosms of that belief, a final enclosure where the soul could regroup before its journey. Some hides were even placed with the fur side inward, as if to mimic the plush interiors of their tents. It's a poignant detail, a reminder that death, to the Scythians, wasn't an exile but a relocation, a movement from one familiar space to another. One of the most evocative finds comes from the Altai Mountains, where a child's burial revealed a small hide coffin lined with herbs. Here, the skin wasn't just a shell but a cared-for space, softened with fragrant plants as if to ease the transition. This tenderness underscores a universal truth. Even warriors feared for their children's comfort in the unknown. The animal skin coffins also challenge modern assumptions about burial advancement. We often equate sophistication with elaborate materials, but the Scythians remind us that meaning matters more. A golden mask might dazzle, but a horsehide coffin speaks of kinship with animals, of respect for resources, of a culture that saw death as an extension of their wanderings. As we leave these skin-bound graves behind, we'll next uncover how the Scythians used music to bridge the worlds of the living and the dead, with flutes crafted from an unsettling yet sacred material, human bones. Now we step into one of the most haunting yet fascinating aspects of Scythian burials, where music and mortality intertwine in the most unexpected way. Hidden among the grave goods of warriors and shamans, archaeologists have uncovered flutes crafted not from wood or reed, but from human femurs, the very bones of the dead. These so-called singing bones reveal a culture that blurred the line between instrument and relic, turning the body itself into a voice for the afterlife. Imagine the scene, a Scythian funeral procession on the windswept steppe, where the mournful sound of a bone flute cuts through the silence. These flutes weren't crude noisemakers. They were carefully hollowed out with precise finger holes carved to produce distinct pitches. Some were polished smooth, others etched with animal motifs like the stags and griffins we've seen in other burials. But the most chilling detail, many were made from the femurs of adults, suggesting a deliberate choice to repurpose the remains of respected elders or fallen warriors. The discovery of these instruments raises spine-tingling questions. Were they played during burial rites to guide the deceased, their melodies acting as oral maps for the soul? Or perhaps they were gifted to the dead, meant to be played in the afterlife as a form of communication with the living. The Scythians believed in an active spirit world, and music held shamanic power across many ancient cultures. In China, for example, oracle bones were used to divine the future. Could these flutes have served a similar purpose, with each note carrying a message from beyond? One theory points to the femur's symbolic weight. As the strongest bone in the body, it represented endurance and vitality. By transforming it into an instrument, the Scythians may have been preserving the essence of the person, literally giving them a voice that outlasted death. Some flutes were found placed near the skulls of the buried, as if positioned to sing directly to their owners. Others were tucked into the hands of skeletons, implying they were personal possessions rather than ceremonial objects. The acoustics of these flutes add another layer of intrigue. Experiments with replicas show they produce a hollow, resonant tone distinct from wooden flutes. This eerie sound quality might have been intentional, a way to mimic the otherworldly. In Siberian shamanism, certain tones were believed to open portals to the spirit realm. Could the Scythians have used these bone flutes in rituals, their music summoning ancestors or warding off malevolent forces? Not all singing bones were human, though. Some flutes were made from the leg bones of swans or eagles, birds associated with flight and transcendence. This duality, human and avian, hints at a deeper cosmology. Just as the Scythians buried their dead with horse hides to ride into the afterlife, these bird bone flutes may have symbolized the soul's ascent, their melodies lifting the spirit skyward. Then there's the darker possibility that some flutes were trophies. Among warlike cultures, turning an enemy's bone into an instrument wasn't unheard of, an ultimate act of dominance. Yet most Scythian examples show no signs of violence, suggesting reverence rather than desecration. In fact, a few flutes were buried with their own miniature cases, implying they were treasured heirlooms passed down generations. The most poignant find comes from a Kurgan in modern-day Kazakhstan, where a flute was discovered beside the skeleton of a young woman. Analysis revealed it had been played extensively, its mouthpiece worn smooth. Was she a musician in life, her bone flute a bridge between worlds, or was the instrument a loved one's final gift meant to comfort her in eternity? The answer is lost to time, but the object itself is a testament to the Scythians' belief that death wasn't silent, it was a song waiting to be heard. This practice challenges our modern separation of the sacred and the macabre. For the Scythians, there was no contradiction in crafting beauty from bone. In their view, the body wasn't just a vessel to discard but a resource to honor, one that could literally carry a tune into the next life. As we ponder these haunting melodies, we turn next to a practice that burned away the old to make way for the new. The Scythian rituals of fire purification, where tombs were set ablaze in a transformative farewell. Moving from the haunting echoes of bone flutes, we now encounter a burial ritual that crackles with raw elemental power, the Scythian practice of fire purification. Archaeologists have uncovered dozens of kurgans with scorched walls, charred wooden beams, and layers of ash, telling a story of tombs deliberately set ablaze before their final sealing. This wasn't accidental damage from raiders or natural disasters. The patterns are two precise fires lit at the entrance of burial chambers, burning inward in controlled waves, leaving some artifacts untouched while reducing others to cinders. The Scythians saw fire as both a destroyer and a purifier, a force capable of wiping away corruption while ushering in rebirth. This duality appears across Indo-European cultures, from the Vedic Agnihotra ceremonies in ancient India to the Zoroastrian towers of silence in Persia. For nomadic peoples like the Scythians, fire was a practical necessity, keeping predators at bay, forging weapons, warding off winter's bite. But in death, it took on a sacred role. By burning the tomb's interior, they may have sought to sterilize the space, incinerating any malevolent spirits that could follow the deceased into the afterlife. Some of the most striking evidence comes from the Pazyryk Kurgans of Siberia, where permafrost preserved telltale signs of ritual burning. In Kurgan 2, excavators found a layer of birch bark intentionally ignited atop the burial chamber, creating an oxygen-starved smolder that left soot patterns resembling deliberate symbols. Nearby, a bronze censer, a vessel used for sacred smoke, held remnants of juniper and cannabis, suggesting the fire was paired with hallucinogenic fumes to amplify its spiritual potency. This combination of flame and fragrant smoke mirrors shamanic traditions still practiced by Siberian tribes today, where fire cleanses both the physical and metaphysical realms. The transformative power of fire also explains why certain objects were spared. Gold items which don't burn were often left pristine, while organic materials like felt rugs or wooden carvings were reduced to charcoal. This selective destruction hints at a symbolic reshuffling, stripping away the perishable to elevate the eternal. Even the bodies themselves show signs of exposure to heat. In the Arjun II Kurgan, the so-called Scythian king had patches of skin that appeared partially singed, possibly from a final anointing with flame before burial. Parallels abound in other ancient cultures. The Vikings sent their dead chiefs to Valhalla on burning ships. The Celts of Gaul built funerary pyre tombs where corpses were cremated in situ before mound construction. What sets the Scythians apart is the theatricality of their approach. At the Chertomlik Kurgan in Ukraine, archaeologists reconstructed the sequence. After placing the dead queen and her sacrificed retinue inside, mourners stacked fuel along the tomb's entrance, lit it, and retreated as flames licked toward the central chamber. Once the fire burned out, they collapsed the roof, sealing the ashes under tons of earth. This wasn't just cleanup, it was a performance, a visual spectacle reinforcing the idea of death as a metamorphosis. Fire's role in Scythian cosmology likely extended beyond funerals. Greek historian Herodotus described their oath-swearing rituals, where parties dripped blood onto swords thrust into blazing fire pits, calling down curses on oath breakers. The element's ability to test truth consuming the false, sparing the pure made it a natural ally in rites of passage. This belief survives in folklore. Across Central Asia, people still leap over bonfires during Noel as celebrations to purge misfortune. The question remains, why not simply cremate the dead outright, as many contemporaries did? The answer may lie in the Scythians' layered view of the afterlife. Unlike cultures that saw cremation as a one-way ticket to the spirit world, they appear to have viewed fire as a preparatory step, a way to activate the tomb as a portal. Some Kurgans show evidence of multiple burnings over decades, hinting at recurring ceremonies to nourish or commune with the dead. Modern experiments shed light on the logistics. Using replica tombs, researchers found that a single fire could burn for up to 12 hours if fueled correctly, reaching temperatures hot enough to calcine bone but not melt gold. The resulting environment, a mix of searing heat and billowing smoke, would have been overwhelming, even hallucinogenic for participants. This sensory overload may have been the point, plunging mourners into an altered state where the boundary between worlds felt thin. One chilling detail emerges from Kurgans near the Don River: the remains of horses and servants sacrificed post-fire. Their unburned bodies were placed atop cooled ashes, suggesting the blaze was a prelude to further offerings. Perhaps these individuals were meant to serve in a purified underworld, their spirits cleansed along with the tomb. The legacy of these rituals lingers. In the Russian Republic of Tuva, where Scythian descendants still live, funerals sometimes include a ceremonial passing through smoke to this day. And in archaeology, the presence of fire-purified kurgans helps identify elite burials. Ordinary graves rarely received such lavish send-offs. As the embers of this practice fade from view, we turn next to a quieter but equally profound mystery: the Scythian tradition of placing stones or coins over the eyes of the dead, a gesture that may have been about vision both in this world and the next. Now, shifting our gaze from the cleansing flames of fire rituals, we arrive at a quieter yet equally intriguing Scythian burial custom. the placement of stones or coins over the eyes of the dead. This seemingly simple act opens a window into their complex beliefs about the afterlife, vision, and the journey of the soul. Across numerous excavated Kurgans, archaeologists have uncovered skeletons with small, flat stones, polished discs, or even gold coins carefully positioned over the eye sockets. These artifacts weren't accidental debris, they were deliberate, meaningful additions to the burial rite. One prevailing theory connects this practice to the ancient Greek concept of charon's obol, the coin placed in the mouth of the deceased to pay the underworld ferryman. The Scythians, who traded extensively with Greek colonies along the Black Sea, may have adapted this idea, using eye coverings as their version of spiritual currency. But there's a twist. While Greeks used a single coin for charon, Scythians often placed two objects, one for each eye, suggesting a more layered symbolism. In some burials, like those near the Dnieper River, the stones were sourced from distant locations, hinting that their value wasn't just practical but symbolic, possibly representing a toll for both entering and exiting the underworld. Another interpretation ties the practice to the Scythians' fear of the evil eye. Many nomadic cultures believed the dead could cast malevolent glances back into the world of the living, inviting misfortune. By weighing down the eyelids with stones or metal, mourners might have been symbolically severing this connection, ensuring the deceased couldn't harm their descendants. Supporting this idea, several Kurgans contain bodies with not just eye coverings but also cloth bands wrapped around the skull, as if to further immobilize the corpse's gaze. Yet the most visually striking connection lies in the gold masks of Scythian elites. Ordinary tribespeople received stones or cheap bronze discs, but high-ranking individuals occasionally had thin gold foil placed over their eyes, mirroring the luxurious death masks of kings and queens. This could imply that eye coverings weren't just protective or transactional but also markers of status, a way to grant the dead a form of eternal sight in the afterlife. The famous Siberian Ice Maiden, for example, had small gold plaques over her eyes, aligning with her elite burial goods, including a headdress adorned with golden animals. The variation in materials tells its own story. In the poorer steppe regions, simple river pebbles were used, while coastal tribes near the Crimea opted for seashells or carved bone discs. Among the Pazyryk culture in the Altai Mountains, archaeologists found eye coverings made of felt embroidered with protective symbols, a nod to their shamanistic traditions. This regional diversity suggests the practice was flexible, adapting to local resources and beliefs while maintaining a core funerary function. Intriguingly, some burials blur the line between the symbolic and the practical. In a few Kurgans, the eyes were actually clay plugs, sealing the sockets after the eyeballs had decomposed, a possible hygiene measure that later took on spiritual meaning. Other graves, like those in Moldova, reveal coins minted decades after the person's death, indicating family members revisited tombs to update the offerings, perhaps as part of ancestor worship rituals. The debate over this practice extends to its possible ties to astronomy. Scythian corpses were typically aligned north-south, with their heads pointing toward the pole star, a celestial marker of constancy. If the eye coverings represented stars or planets, they might have served as navigational aids for the soul's journey. Bronze Age cultures like the Yamnaya, ancestors of the Scythians, buried their dead with star-like stone arrangements, hinting at an ancient tradition the Scythians could have inherited. Modern parallels persist in surprising ways. In parts of Greece and Romania, villagers still place coins on the eyes of the dead during funerals, a direct echo of these ancient rites. Even the phrase, "keeping an eye on you," may linguistically trace back to old superstitions about the dead watching the living, a reminder of how deeply such beliefs are woven into human culture. As we close this chapter on the Scythians' enigmatic eye rituals, we're left with a mosaic of possible meanings: payment, protection, status, or celestial guidance. Each burial offers a clue, but the full picture remains tantalizingly out of reach. Next, we'll examine how the Scythians oriented their dead to the north, a practice steeped in cosmic significance and the mysteries of the eternal night sky. Turning our attention to the silent language of the grave, we encounter one of the most universal yet mysterious aspects of Scythian burials, the deliberate positioning of the dead. Unlike the chaotic sprawl of battlefields, these tombs reveal a striking pattern. The vast majority of Scythian corpses were laid to rest on a north-south axis, their heads consistently pointing toward the northern skies. This wasn't random chance, but a carefully choreographed farewell that may have served as the final compass for souls navigating the afterlife. The north-south alignment resonates deeply with the Scythians' nomadic identity. For a culture that traversed the endless steppes, celestial navigation wasn't just practical, it was spiritual. The pole star, known as the nail of the sky in some Eurasian traditions, held immovable in the northern heavens while other stars wheeled around it. By aligning their dead with this fixed point, the Scythians may have been offering a cosmic anchor, ensuring the deceased wouldn't wander aimlessly in the spirit world. Excavations in Ukraine's Chertomlik Kurgans show skeletons with their skulls tilted slightly upward, as if eternally gazing at this celestial guidepost. This practice stands in stark contrast to other ancient burial traditions. Christian medieval graves, for instance, typically face east, anticipating the sunrise and the second coming of Christ. Egyptian pharaohs were often oriented toward the Nile source or the circumpolar stars, reflecting their belief in joining the gods. The Scythians' northward focus suggests a unique cosmology, one where death wasn't about rebirth like solar-worshipping cultures, but perhaps about joining ancestors in a star-bound realm. Archaeologists have noted fascinating regional variations. In the Altai Mountains, Pazyryk burials show bodies aligned northwest-southeast, possibly adjusting for magnetic declination or local topography. Near the Black Sea, some aristocratic tombs display a corrected north alignment. Workers apparently used simple astronomy tools to adjust for true north rather than magnetic north. This precision implies the direction held profound ritual importance, not merely symbolic gestures. The north-south axis may also reflect the Scythians' dualistic worldview. Their mythology spoke of opposing forces, sky and earth, male and female, summer and winter camps. Burying individuals along this celestial meridian could have symbolized balance in the afterlife. Supporting this, some Kurgans contain paired burials, a warrior facing north, a woman facing south, mirroring the gendered division of their living world. The famous Arjun II burial in Tuva showcases this perfectly, with a chieftain and his consort aligned along this cosmic axis, surrounded by golden artifacts depicting the sun and moon. Curiously, this practice finds echoes in earlier steppe cultures. The Yamnaya people, ancestors of the Scythians, buried their dead in a flexed position pointing north as early as 3,000 years before. Even today, Mongolian and Kazakh nomads pitch their yurts with doors facing south for protection from northern winds, while traditional funerals maintain northward body orientations. This unbroken thread suggests the Scythians inherited and refined a pan-Eurasian tradition linking death, direction, and destiny. Modern science adds an eerie layer to this ancient custom. Studies on death posture in European folklore reveal that before rigor mortis sets in, corpses often shift slightly toward magnetic north, a phenomenon called the compass of the dead. While the Scythians couldn't have known about Earth's magnetic field, their observations of this subtle movement might have reinforced their celestial beliefs. Some researchers speculate that early nomads noticed certain animals, like migrating birds or cattle, aligning north-south when resting, potentially inspiring human burial practices. The contrast with agricultural societies is telling. Farmers like the ancient Egyptians oriented burials toward fertile river valleys or seasonal cycles. But for mobile herders like the Scythians, whose lives depended on reading stars for migration timing, a stellar afterlife made primal sense. This distinction appears in their grave goods too. While Egyptian tombs contained seeds and farming tools, Scythian Kurgans held star charts and horse gear for celestial journeys. As the Silk Road connected cultures, the Scythian North-South tradition subtly influenced others. Han Dynasty Chinese texts note that Xiongnu nomads, cultural cousins of the Scythians, buried leaders facing north as a sign of sovereignty. Even in Viking Age Scandinavia, high-status ship burials sometimes aligned north, possibly through steppe cultural diffusion. Yet the Scythians' version remains uniquely tied to their environment, where the vast horizonless steppe made the heavens the only reliable map. This silent testimony of the graves leaves us with profound questions. Was north simply a practical marker, or did it represent the upper world in their shamanistic cosmology? Did the dead become stars themselves, as some Scythian gold ornaments depicting human figures among constellations suggest? As we prepare to explore the next mystery, the so-called cursed burial mounds whispered about for centuries, we carry with us this image of ancient nomads trusting the eternal stars to guide their loved ones home. Now, let's step into the realm of the uncanny, where ancient graves whisper tales of curses and restless spirits. Among the Scythian burial mounds, some Kurgans have earned a sinister reputation, avoided by locals for generations as places of bad luck or supernatural danger. These so-called cursed mounds often sit untouched, shrouded in folklore that warns of misfortune befalling anyone who disturbs them. But beneath the ghost stories, science offers intriguing explanations for these eerie phenomena. Take the massive Soloka Kurgan in Ukraine, for example. For centuries, villagers spoke of strange lights flickering over its summit and the sound of phantom horses galloping at midnight. When archaeologists finally excavated it in the early 20th century, they uncovered a royal burial chamber, along with something unexpected. The soil around the tomb showed high levels of methane gas, a byproduct of decomposing organic matter sealed beneath the earth. This invisible, odorless gas can cause dizziness, hallucinations, and even asphyxiation in confined spaces. Could this explain why laborers reported feeling breathless or seeing apparitions while digging near the mound? Similar accounts surround the Tolstaya Mogila Kurgan, where Soviet-era researchers measured abnormal electromagnetic pulses near the site, possibly caused by mineral deposits or underground water currents disrupting natural fields. Then there's the chilling case of the Issyk Kurgan in Kazakhstan. Local herders long believed the tomb housed a vengeful spirit after several cattle mysteriously died near its base. Modern geologists discovered the area sits atop a minor fault line, with occasional seismic activity releasing subterranean gases. These emissions might have poisoned grazing animals, fueling legends of a curse. Even more striking is how some Kurgans, like those in the Altai Mountains, produce audible groaning sounds during temperature shifts. As the permafrost contracts and expands, wooden burial chambers creak like ghostly voices, a phenomenon documented in other ancient tombs worldwide. The Scythians themselves may have contributed to these myths intentionally. Historical accounts describe rituals where shamans buried guardian artifacts, bronze bells, horse skulls filled with mercury or iron rods to ward off grave robbers. When disturbed, these objects could produce metallic echoes or release toxic substances, creating the illusion of supernatural retaliation. The Greek historian Pausanias even wrote of Scythian curses inscribed on tomb entrances, threatening invaders with divine punishment. Yet perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from modern archaeology. In 2019, researchers studying the Tunug-1 Kurgan in Siberia found unusually high arsenic concentrations in the soil, likely from gold processing residues buried with the dead. Prolonged exposure to arsenic dust can cause neurological symptoms mirroring traditional descriptions of spirit possession, twitching limbs, confusion, and vivid nightmares. Combine this with the psychological power of suggestion in communities steeped in folklore, and it's easy to see how curses took root. Interestingly, these dread-filled legends sometimes preserve the tombs better than any security system. While looters plundered countless Kurgans over the millennia, the feared, cursed mounds often remained intact until scientific excavations. The Beryl Kurgan in Kazakhstan, avoided for generations due to tales of a shadowy figure guarding its entrance, yielded perfectly preserved frozen mummies in the 1990s untouched because superstition scared thieves away. As we peel back layers of fear and myth, a fascinating pattern emerges. The Scythians' engineering prowess, their airtight log chambers, embalming techniques, and strategic mound placements created microenvironments where natural processes could mimic the supernatural. From gas emissions to seismic whispers, the very elements meant to honor the dead became ingredients for enduring ghost stories. This blurring of ecology and legend invites us to wonder how many ancient curses worldwide might have equally mundane but no less fascinating origins. With this interplay of science and superstition fresh in our minds, we're ready to confront the final enigma: how modern genetics is rewriting our understanding of the Scythians themselves. Now, as we step into the complex and sometimes contentious world of modern science, we find ourselves facing a question that bridges ancient history and cutting-edge technology. Who were the Scythians really, and what does their DNA tell us about their legacy? The study of Scythian genetics has opened a Pandora's box of ethical dilemmas, groundbreaking discoveries, and heated debates that challenge our understanding of this enigmatic culture. Recent advances in DNA analysis have allowed researchers to extract genetic material from Scythian remains, revealing a fascinating mosaic of ancestry. These nomadic warriors, once thought to be a purely Indo-European people, actually carried a blend of genetic markers linking them to both Europe and East Asia. Studies of skeletons from Kurgans across the Eurasian steppe show a striking mix. Some individuals had genetic ties to modern-day Russians and Ukrainians, while others shared close connections with Mongolian and Kazakh populations. This genetic diversity paints a picture of a highly mobile society that absorbed and integrated people from vastly different regions through conquest, trade, and intermarriage. But the science doesn't stop at ancestry. In Siberia, where permafrost has preserved Scythian mummies with remarkable clarity, geneticists have identified traits like lactose tolerance and even susceptibility to certain diseases still present in modern populations. Some communities in southern Siberia, particularly the Tuvan and Altai peoples, have long claimed descent from the Scythians. Genetic studies lend credibility to these oral traditions, showing shared lineages that stretch back over 2 millennia. Yet with these revelations come ethical quandaries. The extraction and analysis of ancient DNA often require destructive sampling, grinding bone or teeth to extract genetic material. Many argue that this amounts to a violation of these ancient individuals, who clearly intended their remains to rest undisturbed in their elaborate tombs. Indigenous groups in Siberia have protested the removal and testing of Scythian remains, viewing it as a desecration of their ancestors. Some have called for a moratorium on such research unless conducted with the consent of descendant communities. The controversy deepens when we consider how these findings are interpreted. Nationalist groups in both Europe and Asia have selectively used Scythian DNA studies to fuel political narratives, claiming the Scythians as exclusive ancestors of their own modern populations. Russian, Ukrainian, and Kazakh scholars have all engaged in heated debates over who can truly claim Scythian heritage, often ignoring the complex, blended reality revealed by genetics. Perhaps the most poignant discovery, however, is what DNA tells us about the Scythians themselves. Far from being a homogeneous warrior elite, they were a people of incredible diversity, men and women, warriors and herders, artisans and traders, all united by a way of life that spanned continents. Their genetic legacy lives on not in one modern group but in many, a testament to their far-reaching influence across the ancient world. As we close this journey through the Scythians' most bizarre and revealing burial practices, we're left with a profound appreciation for how these rituals reflect a culture both fierce and sophisticated. From golden masks to frozen tombs, their customs have given us glimpses into a world where death was not an end but a transformation. And now, with the tools of modern science, we continue to unravel their secrets ethically, thoughtfully, and with the respect these ancient nomads deserve. If you've been fascinated by these discoveries, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload. And tell us in the comments what's the most surprising Scythian practice you've learned about today. Until next time, keep exploring the past. It's far stranger than fiction. As we wrap up this journey into the shadowy world of the Scythians, it's impossible not to be stunned by the sheer audacity of their burial customs. Imagine a culture so fierce, so spiritually complex, that they sent their dead into the afterlife with golden masks to dazzle the gods, chariots to ride into eternity, and even cannabis to ease the journey. These weren't just rituals, they were statements, declarations of identity carved into the earth itself. The Scythians didn't merely bury their dead. They built entire worlds for them, from the towering Kurgans that pierced the sky to the frozen tombs that defied time. Think about the women warriors laid to rest with bows and daggers, their battle scars preserved in the permafrost. These were the Amazons of Greek legend, real women who shattered gender norms over 2,000 years ago. Or the chiefs buried with their loyal retinues, their deaths a grim testament to loyalty, or perhaps coercion. And who could forget the hallucinogenic tents filled with hemp smoke where the living cleansed themselves beside the dead? These practices weren't random. They were the threads of a belief system that saw death as another frontier to conquer, another realm to dominate. Yet for all we've uncovered, the Scythians still guard their deepest secrets. Hidden beneath the steppes, untouched royal Kurgans may still await discovery, their golden treasures and macabre rites frozen in time. Could the tomb of a Scythian king lie beneath the Black Sea, swallowed by rising waters? Might there be another ice maiden, her tattoos and finery perfectly preserved, ready to rewrite history? The mystery is far from over, so now we turn to you. Which of these burial practices left you the most awestruck? Do you think the Scythians' cannabis rituals were spiritual voyages or simply ancient party tricks? Could those headless corpses with clay prosthetics have been punished criminals, or was there a deeper, stranger meaning? Drop your theories in the comments. Let's keep the conversation alive. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into the Scythians' shadowy world, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more historical deep cuts, and ring that bell so you never miss an adventure into the past. The Scythians may be gone, but their legacy, that's still being unearthed, one astonishing discovery at a time. Until next time, keep digging into history's darkest corners. You never know what or who you might find.